What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description to original creator of this beautiful creation. The Sandaime Hokage and his two most trusted Anbu, Kakashi Hitaki and Matara Higashi, stood in front of a one-way window looking into the pearly white room that held a 6-year-old Naruto Uzumaki, container of the Kyuubi no Kitsune. Sarutobi waited patiently for the doctors to return with the results from the tests that were done on the young child after he was brought in, barely alive. One doctor, in a standard white lab coat, came in with a clipboard. "Well?" the Hokage said in a hopeful tone. "I'm sorry Hokage-sama, if he was brought in sooner we may have been able to do something for him." Kakashi visibly tensed at this, but it went unnoticed by the others. "He's in a state of severe traumatization. Basically, his mind is broken. Shattered, if you will. He's fine physically, but psychologically, he'll never be the same again, I'm sorry." Sarutobi sighed heavily. "I understand, thank you." The doctor bowed and left. Sarutobi and the Anbu turned back to the boy. He was now looking directly at them, as though he could see through the mirror on his side. The men stared back into the boy's dead eyes completely devoid of life, like a walking corpse. It was like he wasn't staring at them, but through them, into their very souls. If it weren't for their training the men would have cringed at the sight. Sarutobi sighed again. "I suppose it was only a matter of time, the boy has been through too much." "I'm sorry, Arashi." One padded holding cell. Naruto sat alone on the semi-comfortable bed, staring at the mirror on the other side of the room. He knew that there were people watching him from the other side of it. He couldn't see them or hear them, but he knew nonetheless. However, he was too tired, both physically and mentally, to care. So, he laid down on the bed he was sitting on and let his heavy eyelids drop and cover his soulless eyes. It was an eerie sight, to say the least. With his eyes having lost the spark of life they once held, it looked like Naruto was slipping quietly into the afterlife. Mindscape. Naruto opened his eyes to find himself in a wet, decrepit, sewer-like hallway. Leaking pipes hung from the ceiling over his head and the water on the floor came up to his knees. Thankfully, though it looked like a sewer, it didn't smell like one. Naruto felt a powerful and malevolent presence further down, hidden in the darkness. But, oddly enough, his instincts weren't screaming at him to run from it. If anything, he felt drawn to it. He began walking towards it, hoping to maybe find a way out of the dungeon he had apparently been thrown into. After 5 minutes of walking, and seemingly getting nowhere, Naruto's patience was starting to wear thin. While anyone else would have started to panic at this point, if not earlier, this 6-year-old was just annoyed. But he could feel the dark presence much better now. It radiated power, arrogance, killing intent, and rage. Now, most people would have been hightailing it in the opposite direction at this point. But not Naruto. He continued onward, idly noting that the knee-high water offered barely any resistance at all. "It's not like I've got anything to lose, right?" Naruto thought. Besides, what could whatever was down here do to him that hadn't already been done? Naruto suddenly found himself in front of a massive cage. The bars must have been over 100 feet in height, but there was no lock on them. Instead there was a piece of white paper with the kanji for seal on it in black. "Who dares disturb my rest?" A deep, rumbling voice boomed, slightly startling Naruto, but he didn't show it. Two large, glowing, red eyes blinked into existence and stared down at him. "Oh, it's you. So, what brings my jailer down here to my humble abode?" The creature mocked. "Who are you? Who am I?" The beast snarled, revealing razor-sharp fangs, each larger than a full-grown man. "I am the great Kyuubi no Kitsune, queen of all demons," Kyuubi boasted. But Naruto paid no real attention to it besides the Kyuubi part, not at all interested in titles and such. There was a sudden flash and Kyuubi was illuminated in all her glory, her 9 bushy tails twitching in agitation. "Cute," Naruto said, then walked through the bars like they didn't exist. Kyuubi blinked, then blinked again. Did this human just call me cute? "I'll show you cute, brat." Kyuubi stopped when she noticed that Naruto was no longer in front of her. "What the?" She stopped again when she felt something touch one of her stationary tails. Naruto had walked over and started to pet one of Kyuubi's tails, as if it were some kind of giant fluffy rabbit. Kyuubi was dumbfounded. No mortal had even touched her before, ever. Given, it was normally because they would be vaporized by her potent yuki before they got close enough. But still, most weren't brave, or stupid, enough to go towards her when she was spotted. "What do you think you're doing, human?" Kyuubi hissed in barely controlled rage. Naruto just looked at her with his cold, dead eyes, almost making her cringe. "I like your fur, it's very soft," he said with no hint of emotion. Kyuubi slightly blushed, but her red fur covered it. Thanks, I guess. So, why are you here again?" Kyuubi now just wanted the kid to leave. He was affecting her in strange ways. Maternal instincts that she thought she had lost long ago were resurfacing. Naruto seemed puzzled for a moment. "Where exactly is here?" Kyuubi's sweat dropped lightly. "We're currently inside your mind. You're asleep right now." "Oh." Naruto looked around. "It seems kind of empty." Kyuubi resisted the urge to snicker. "That's because we're in the seal." "Seal?" "Yes, the seal on your stomach that traps me inside of you for all eternity," the giant fox said somewhat mockingly. "It was placed on you by the Yondaime Hokage after you were born." "Yondaime? I thought Naruto was cut off by Kyuubi's snort. "Killed me? Ha, like some puny human could ever kill a Biju, let alone the most powerful of them all." Naruto just stared at the giant fox. "You have a massive ego, you know that?" he said flatly. "Well, when you're as awesome as I am, that tends to happen." Kyuubi decided that she liked the kid that was in her cage with her. She had almost forgotten what it was like to have a conversation with someone who didn't stutter and tremble in sheer terror, or speak to her in an ultra-formal manner for fear of pissing her off. "He's only the second human I've ever met who doesn't fear me. Like father, like son, I suppose." Naruto sat down, propping himself up on the tail he was petting. "So, you're the reason everyone hates me so much. Well, at least I know what the whole demon spawn thing is about." A look of sadness flashed across his features for a second. Kyuubi snorted. "Well, you finally know. What now? Are you going to go on one of those woe is me rants that you humans are so fond of?" "No," Naruto instantly replied. Kyuubi just blinked. "What? Why not?" In her experience, humans who would pass up a chance to rant and rave about the unfairness of life were few and far between. "Because, it's not going to change anything. It's not going to make you go away, and it's not going to make my life any easier. Looks like we're going to get along just fine." Kyuubi mentally chuckled. "Well, kid, congratulations." Naruto looked puzzled. For what?" "You've officially gained my respect. That makes you part of an elite list that only includes one other human." Kyuubi laid down with her chin on her forepaws. "Who?" "The Yondaime Hokage." Kyuubi replied as she looked into Naruto's eyes. She couldn't help but feel sorry for him. Eyes like that shouldn't belong to a child that young. She mentally sighed. Naruto yawned and stood. "Well, I guess I should go. I hope I wasn't too much of a bother." He bowed to her and began to leave. Naruto was stopped by one of Kyuubi's tails scooping him up and depositing him next to her. "Don't worry about it, you can stay. Besides, it's not often I get company," Kyuubi said. Naruto shrugged, then cuddled up to the huge fox, enjoying the feeling of her fur. Kyuubi blushed again. "If only the others could see me now. How would I look? Me, the queen of Kitsune and ruler of demons, having a human child cuddling up to me. I'd be the laughing stock of the underworld." Kyuubi sighed. She really didn't mind having Naruto around. Kyuubi used one of her tails as a blanket for the child. "Thank you, Kyuubi-hime." Kyuubi almost choked. Even her former mate had never called her that, or any other pet name, as he was one of the ultra-formal types. She just nodded in response. Just before Naruto fell asleep, Kyuubi spoke up. "Listen, kid. For what it's worth, I'm sorry." Naruto just looked up at her. "What's done is done. We can't change the past, all we can do is try to shape our future," he said, remembering something his OG-san had told him a few weeks ago. "Good night, Kyuubi-hime." And with that Naruto fell into a deep slumber. Kyuubi smiled. "Good night, Naruto." 6 years later, Naruto sat in the back of the classroom in his own little corner. He basically had half a row all to himself, as no one wanted to sit next to him. To some, he was just creepy. To others, he was downright terrifying. But to all, he was an unknown. He rarely spoke, and when he did it was never about himself. Combined with his mask and cloak, He was the definition of an enigma to his peers. His name sounded familiar to some, but from what they could remember, that name was attached to a small, blonde-haired child that their parents told them to stay away from. But that kid and their classmate couldn't have been one and the same. They remembered a friendly, borderline ADHD little boy, whose bright blue eyes were outshined only by his exuberant grin. That child was eager to please, and seemed to love nothing more than acknowledgement and interaction. But this, Naruto, when asked to introduce himself, his exact words were, "My name is Uzumaki Naruto, and you need only know one thing about me. You leave me alone, and I'll leave you alone." No, the fact that they shared a name and hair color had to be a coincidence. Right? For his part, Naruto couldn't have cared less about what his peers thought of him. Most of them bullied and tormented him years back. Some at the request of their parents, and others because it was trendy. But none of that mattered now. None of them mattered now. As was his custom, Naruto surveyed the classroom, silently evaluating each and every one of his potential teammates. Just like every other day, he saw nothing of interest in any of them. Though some were orders of magnitude worse than others, they were all weak and naive, as far as Naruto was concerned. This made the arrogance displayed by some of them all the more irritating, amusing. Take the Inuzuka, for example. Yes, he was heir to one of the more prominent clans in Konoha. Yes, he had the third best overall scores in the class. The problem was that he seemed to have trouble grasping things like context. In the context of the Ninja Academy, Kiba Inuzuka showed great promise. What Kiba didn't understand was that in the real world, academy scores count for nothing. Especially since the academy's current standards were abysmal. A solid A in taijutsu against a Chunin who, by default, was holding back. And A- in weapon proficiency and accuracy against static targets. A, B+ in ninjutsu for pulling off a couple of supplementary E-class techniques, and some clan techniques that all Inuzuka were taught before they even entered the academy. But context meant nothing to Kiba. The boy walked around with his nose in the air, acting like he was Kami's gift to shinobi. Apparently, the Inuzuka felt Naruto's eyes on him, because he turned around in his seat and looked at the people behind him. It didn't take long for him to lock onto the one he called Creepshow, though of course not to his face. And it didn't take long for Kiba to get creeped out. That mask, white as porcelain. Its smooth surface flawless, save for the 3 kanji carved into it. Darkness on the forehead, fire on the right cheek, and wind on the left cheek. Looking into the eyes of that mask, Kiba wasn't the first to be reminded of a shark. They were black, empty, dead. They appeared to stare at everything and nothing, all at once. Mindless and unfocused. But what you saw from the outside was only a cover, a protective layer. And behind that barrier lay the creature's true, terrifying nature. A killing machine unrivaled by anything else in nature, the perfect predator. That cloak, black as pitch, wrapped around him in such a way that it completely obscured his form, making him look like some strange, semi-amorphous thing, coughed up from a pit of pure evil. Though it covered even his feet for the most part, he moved around with ease, never tripping or stumbling over it. Though it appeared somewhat heavy, even the slightest breeze, like the one coming in from the classroom's open windows, would cause it to flutter and ripple. At times, it looked like the garment itself was alive. Or worse, it gave the appearance of unnatural, inhuman movement inside. To this day, Ino Yamanaka swore that she had seen a tentacle come out from underneath it. "Pipe down, you little brats," came a sudden bellowing roar from the primary class instructor, Iruka Amino, as he entered the room. Thoroughly startled, Kiba let out a high-pitched yelp and literally jumped out of his seat, over the person to his immediate left, and into Ino's lap. "What the hell? Get off me, you smell like a doghouse," the platinum blonde girl shrieked, decking Kiba right in the cheek and sending him tumbling over the table and onto a male student in the row ahead, who also proceeded to yell out his displeasure. Why must everyone be so loud? Naruto wondered. It was pretty much the same thing every day. The children would be chatting away, Iruka would yell, they'd all scream in fright. There were a few exceptions, but in general the class was a literal pain in Naruto's ears. How he'd managed to attend for 6 straight years without tearing someone's larynx out, even he didn't know. As Iruka took his place behind the teacher's podium at the front of the class, Naruto immediately stopped paying attention. The last parts of the graduation exam were to be held tomorrow, meaning that today would be nothing but a refresher class to make sure there were no excuses for not passing. Hey, Kyubi-hime, are you awake? Yeah, and stop calling me princess. I'm a queen, thank you very much. Naruto could almost imagine the fox inside him pouting like a child. What would you prefer, then? Queen Kyubi, the Magnificent. The demoness said immediately, her tone dead serious. You're right, it still doesn't do my greatness justice. How about, Queen of all that is awesome? This is harder than I thought it would be. Oh well, the burden of being me. We might have to create a new word just to describe the sheer magnitude of my incredibleness. Well, it's a start. Kyubi muttered, as if she had forgotten that she was talking out loud. Now, in reality she wasn't nearly so arrogant. But she knew Naruto better than anyone, and if there was one thing that truly got on the boys' nerves nowadays, it was hearing someone brag about themselves. And it was especially irritating when the person bragging had every right to do so. As much as I love listening to you stroke your ego, I believe Amino-sensei is about to call on me. Naruto closed off his mind link with his tenon just as the scarred Chunin pointed at him. Mr. Uzumaki, would you mind giving us a demonstration of the concept? Iruka smirked. He had a good one this time. It was one thing to show you were paying attention by repeating what was said, but quite another to physically demonstrate the lesson. Hopefully this would finally trip up the unflappable preteen, so Iruka could finally cross that last name off the list of students who got away with slacking off in his class. Naruto sighed and got out of his seat. Yet another classroom routine that had been going for years. Iruka would catch Naruto not paying attention, then call him out in an attempt to embarrass the masked boy in front of the class. He did it to every student he caught slacking off, so one could hardly say he was picking on Naruto out of spite. The masked boy was simply the most frequent and blatant culprits, behind the Nara of course. He walked to the front of the classroom and turned to face the students. But not before sending a pointed stare at both Iruka and the other instructor, Mizuki. Naruto took out a kunai, giving the class a rare glimpse of the enbu-like attire he wore underneath, infused it with some of his chakra and quickly scanned the classroom. Who would he make a fool out of today? Kiba was out, as he'd already been gotten, albeit unintentionally. The Uchiha, perhaps? No, he hadn't done anything to warrant public humiliation. Yet, then Naruto's keen ears picked up something that made his decision for him. Hey, I don't see any tentacles, Ino pig. Sakura Haruno whispered as leaned closer to her rival. Well, of course he's not gonna show them to everyone, you idiot. Ino hissed back, use your brain, or is that gigantic forehead purely for show? Let's compare test scores and find out. Sakura smirked, whatever. I know what I saw, billboard brow, and I saw a freaking tentacle. Ino huffed as she turned away. Sakura snickered quietly, knowing she had won that round. Target acquired, Naruto thought. He then tossed it to his left with a casual flick of his wrist. For the first 6 feet, it flew as anyone would expect. But the dagger soon veered off to the right, curving around in a smooth arc to make a complete U-turn in midair. As it passed over their heads, the students instinctively ducked, and many man points were lost when some of the boys let out high-pitched screams. But none screamed louder than Ino when the kunai took a dive directly towards her. Fortunately, Iruka was very quick, even for a Chunin, and managed to catch the weapon before it embedded itself in the young girl's skull. Naruto! Iruka screamed in outrage. He had heard Ino's tentacle comment just as well as Naruto, but that kind of reaction was inexcusable. The black-clad boy was completely unfazed. You asked me to demonstrate, and I did. The kunai was locked onto Yamanaka-san's chakra signature, and went for her even though I threw it in a different direction. Naruto said, his tone flat and uncaring. I do not see what the problem is. You don't see. You just tried to murder a classmate. A clan heir. In front of 25 witnesses, including 2 Chunin instructors. Iruka would admit that he had disliked Naruto from the moment he'd seen the boy's name on the class roster. But as the years passed and he kept true to his statement of, you leave me alone, and I'll leave you alone, the Chunin had changed his opinions. The kid had been through hell, and seemed like he just wanted to get through the day without being bothered. Sure, he sent a couple students to the hospital every now and then, but they were always the ones to initiate the conflict. But there was no justifying this latest act as anything but blatantly malicious. Ino had never done anything to Naruto. She was too afraid to even get near him. More often than not, she even went out of her way to avoid talking about him, whether he was in the same room or not. "No, I did not," was Naruto's simple reply. "You threw a weapon right at her." "It wasn't a weapon." "Alright, that does it, I'm sick of your games. You wanna play dumb? Fine, we'll see what the Hokage has to say about TH. It was then that Iruka noticed something odd about the kunai he had snatched out of the air. At first glance, it looked normal, and had the right weight and balance. But upon closer inspection, it was plain to see that it wasn't made out of steel. Metal core for accurate weight and balance, hard rubber outer shell, foam tip. It's a fake. More specifically, one of the higher-end training kunai that could be bought at any of Konoha's weapon shops. Well, this is embarrassing, Iruka thought, feeling a blush on his cheeks. Did you think I would throw a real kunai at Yamanaka-san? Naruto scoffed lightly. Her voice may irritate me, but that's hardly a valid reason for termination. It's nice to see you were paying attention, Mr. Uzumaki. You may return to your seat, Iruka said as he handed the fake kunai back to its owner. Naruto nodded and made his way back up the stairs. As he passed Ino's row, he couldn't help but smirk when he saw her hunker down in her seat in an apparent attempt to avoid being noticed. The smirk disappeared when he noticed the Uchiha glaring at him. Turning his head, Naruto proceeded to have a little stare-down with the black-haired boy. Everyone took notice, expecting a fight to break out at any second. Even the two instructors tensed, preparing to break it up before they could do too much damage, either to each other or to the classroom itself. Sasuke muttered as he turned back to his window gazing. There was no reason to get angry or insecure. He knew the chakra seeker trick, too, though he'd admit that his weapons made much wider turns, and tended to lose a bit of speed in doing so. Naruto continued back to his seat, then reopened his link with Kyuubi. He didn't have to wait long for her to speak up. "And you say you don't like to show off?" She giggled. "I don't, but I'm not going to back down when the instructor calls me out." Naruto replied, "I wouldn't expect you to. But that was above and beyond the call of duty, I suppose. So, Kyuubi-sensei, what's on the training schedule for today?" Naruto might have been emotionally inept, but he was still a sucker for new techniques. Kyuubi sighed. "Will you make up your mind? Is it Kyuubi-sensei, Kyuubi-hime, Kyuubi-sama, or Q-chan? This is getting confusing. Have you decided on another title? Oh, right. How about Kyuubi the Great? Or maybe Kyuubi the Conqueror?" Naruto's sweat dropped lightly. "Kyuubi-sensei it is. You need to learn how to lighten up a little. I'll leave that to people like Inuzuka-san. I'd rather be a proper shinobi." "Ooh, burn." Kyuubi snickered. "I'm going to work out the lesson plan for the day, give me a few minutes." Naruto cut off the link and decided to listen to the last part of Iruka's lesson. "Well, we've taught you all we could, and you've all grown immensely." The brown-haired man smiled. "This class is the best we've had in years, and I'm sure you'll all make fine shinobi and kunoichi. Although some of you have personality issues," Iruka added in his mind, looking at Shino, Sasuke and Naruto. The masked soon-to-be genin barely withheld a derisive snort. Iruka was lying through his teeth, and he knew it. How the hell could anyone become a fine shinobi, kunoichi, when all they had been taught thus far was a bunch of useless trivia and the most basic of techniques? Out of all 24 students in the class, maybe 5 of them would ever make something of themselves. And with the exception of Naruto, they were all from prominent clans, from which they could receive all the training they really needed. As most of you know, the final portion of the graduation exam is tomorrow, and after that you'll all be assigned to your teams. I wish you all the best of luck. "Ha, I don't need luck, I'll ace this exam," boasted Kiba. He says that like it's an accomplishment. Naruto thought. He had half a mind to sabotage the class clown, Loudmouth's test, if only to knock him down about a dozen pegs or so. I'd probably be doing him a favor. That kind of arrogance would get him killed pretty quickly, especially when he doesn't have the power or skill to back it up. While Naruto had the decency to keep his remarks to himself, Sasuke wasn't so tactful. He let out a scoff that he knew Kiba would hear. "You got something to say, Uchiha?" The feral boy growled, baring the elongated canine teeth that were one of many Inuzuka trademarks. "Nothing I haven't said to you before, Inuzuka," Sasuke replied flippantly, not even bothering to look at the person he was addressing. Enough, both of you. Iruka commanded. If you want to be petty and act like little children, that's your business. But there will be no unsanctioned fighting on school grounds. Understood? Kiba and Sasuke shared one last glare, flashing each other a clear message, then nodded to their instructor. There were several disappointed sighs from the other students as they were once again deprived of a spectacle. With nothing else of interest, they all began to filter out of the room. Now normally Naruto would have used the body flicker to leave the room. But he felt that he had drawn enough attention to himself for one day, and decided to leave in a more normal fashion. Unfortunately, Iruka noticed this and took the opportunity to do something he'd wanted to do for a while. Naruto, a moment please? Naruto halted mid-step, as did the other students who had heard. The only time Iruka ever called him by his first name was when he was angry. So naturally, the others figured the instructor was still steamed about the incident with Ino. And if it's one thing kids can't resist, it's the chance to see one of their peers get in trouble. But Naruto had no desire for an audience, and a single glance, combined with a small pulse of killing intent, sent them all scurrying away. What do you want, Iruka-sensei? Naruto asked. Iruka mentally flinched. Though his tone didn't give anything away, he could feel that the boy was annoyed. And worse, now that he had Naruto alone, he had no idea what to say to him. First, he needed something to break the ice. Will you be showing up to the exam tomorrow? Iruka asked, remembering that Naruto had been a no-show for the last graduation exam. Naruto remained silent at first. This was shaping up to be an even greater waste of time than he'd predicted. But he really didn't have anything to do until Kyuubi got back to him, so he decided there wasn't any harm in humoring the scarred man. Certainly. I will not let any would-be assassins hold me back again. What assassins? The ones hell-bent on keeping me from becoming a genin last year. They followed me until the exams were through, blasting me with killing intent when I got too close to the academy. I'm surprised you couldn't feel them. Naruto could have gotten by them if he had really wanted to. But back then he'd felt that it would have been more trouble than it was worth. I am sorry, I didn't know. Iruka lowered his head in shame, on both a personal and professional level. Why? You had nothing to do with it. Naruto found it quite irksome when people apologized for no reason. Sorry was like the go-to response when a person didn't know what else to say. And in Naruto's view, if you didn't know what to say, then it was best to just keep quiet. Iruka felt a shiver go up his spine. And I thought talking to Shino was uncomfortable, he thought. Still, I really should apologize, if only for not being as concerned about your absence as I should have. The man was disgusted with himself when he remembered just how unconcerned he had been. Were he anyone else, Naruto would have been the ideal student. He was always in class, always on time, did as he was told and never talked back. With any other student possessing those qualities, not showing up for the graduation exams would have warranted a home visit. But the thought had never even crossed Iruka's mind. Again, you had nothing to do with it, so you have nothing to apologize for. Will that be all? When Iruka didn't answer immediately, Naruto gave a slight nod, turned on his heel and started towards the door. Well, it's worth a shot. The Chunin thought. Wait, Naruto. Naruto stopped and let out a barely audible sigh. What is it now, Iruka-sensei? Would you like to go get some ramen? Iruka asked. I have somewhere to be at the moment, and I don't like ramen. Though he didn't let it show, the odd request had thrown Naruto for a bit of a loop. So, before the instructor could say anything else, Naruto vanished in a puff of black smoke. Iruka sighed heavily. He wasn't the least bit surprised, not by the response, and not by the fact that someone so young could use the body flicker technique. Well, at least I tried. Elsewhere, Naruto reappeared in the middle of a clearing just outside of the village walls. His own private training ground. So, Kyuubi-sensei, what will I be learning? Naruto opened the link. What did I tell you earlier? Kyuubi tried to sound annoyed. You're teaching me something, so I call you sensei. Naruto replied. Seeing no flaws in his logic, Kyuubi went right to business. Alright, kid, since you've got fire down pat, we're going to focus on the wind element for now. You've got the basics, so let's start with some more advanced techniques. At this point, Naruto was absolutely giddy. Or at least the closest approximation to it that could apply to him. The first one is the air cutter technique. In principle, it's similar to the Keys no Yaiba, in that you use your chakra to compress the air into an incredibly thin and sharp blade. But instead of hurling it at a target, you use the blade as an extension of your arm for close-quarters combat. Also, like Keys no Yaiba, it can be used without hand seals, but since you're new to the technique, we'll do it the traditional way for now. Kyuubi sent Naruto the sequence of seals, which he performed flawlessly. A second later, his right arm was encased in chakra and compressed air from the elbow down. Inspecting the new weapon, Naruto found that it took the form of a vaguely cone-shaped distortion around his arm, extending out 2 feet beyond his fingertips. It also gave off a not insignificant amount of noise, in the form of a low-pitched hum, akin to the sound of a strong breeze. Good, good. With practice, you'll be able to use the bare minimums of air and chakra, making the blade virtually undetectable by sight or sound. But you can start on that later. For now, let's get the rest of these down. The next is the Gufu Jiten, 2. The first step is sort of like the reverse of the tree climbing exercise. You want to pump chakra into your feet in order to break traction with the ground, then spin as fast as you can. As you do this, use your chakra to grab the air and pull it with you, wrapping it around you. Keep picking up speed and grabbing more air, and eventually you'll create a miniature tornado around yourself. Excellent for deflecting projectiles, and few things are more entertaining than seeing humans get tossed around like rag dolls. Kyuubi finished with a snicker. Though he used the correct seals, Naruto failed the first 3 tries. He ended up getting sick before he could build up enough rotational speed. But on the 4th, he sucked it up and powered through the nausea. The end result is a vortex of wind the size of a large dust devil, but packing the force of an EF3 tornado. With the technique completed, Naruto gradually brought himself to a halt. He then calmly walked over to a row of small bushes at the eastern edge of the clearing, removed his mask and promptly expelled the contents of his stomach all over the foliage. It took a good 10 minutes for Kyuubi to stop laughing. You knew that was going to happen. Naruto accused. It happens to everyone at least once. Kyuubi replied. Even you? Peeved. No, of course not. The Queen of Demons chortled. I was a bit dizzy the first time, but I didn't hurl. Right, next technique, please. Sure, I've got a few more wind techniques that should prove useful. While he was all for more techniques, of any kind, right now Naruto had something else in mind. Sensei, I feel I'm ready to learn some darkness techniques now. Kyuubi thought for a minute. Damn, I really wanted to put this off a bit longer, but if he thinks he's ready, I'll start him off slow. Very well, Kit, I suppose you've got a good enough grasp of the element and how to control it. The problem is the nature of darkness itself. Its ability to corrupt and control is part of what makes it so useful, but that's also what makes it the most dangerous element to its wielder. You're saying that it will try to corrupt me? Exactly. I've told you before that elemental affinities affect you physically from the moment you're born. Those with fire affinities have naturally high body temperatures, for example. But affinities also affect your mind. Those with fire affinities are usually quick to anger. Wind affinities are often free-spirited and restless. Water affinities tend to go with the flow and try to take the path of least resistance whenever possible. But with darkness, it's different. It brings out the worst in you. Your inner darkness, so to speak. It thrives on negative emotions, and it will use them against you. It will try to trick and manipulate you, with the ultimate goal of completely taking over. This is why your current state is ideal for starting down the path to elemental mastery. Being emotionally stunted as you are, there isn't much for the darkness to latch onto. This gives you a head start, so to speak, and may allow you to master the element before it's able to influence you at all. And you said I needed to lighten up. Naruto teased. Hey, a bit of positivity isn't a problem. It's negative emotions that the element feeds on. You almost make it sound like it's alive. It kinda is, along with all the other elements. Remember what I told you about how elemental affinities are decided and where they come from? Oh, right, the boss spirits. Naruto nodded in understanding. According to Kyuubi, every element had a boss spirit, a sentient physical manifestation of the element itself. She had never told him exactly how they came to be, but they were the reason for elemental affinities. Anyway, onto the darkness training. Look down at your shadow to begin with the first technique. Naruto did as instructed. Alright, now concentrate on it. Send out some chakra, and think of a doorway. Naruto complied and watched curiously as his shadow reshaped itself to become a perfect circle around his feet. He had to resist the urge to jump away as the shadow became completely black, looking like a bottomless hole in the ground beneath him. But he was still on solid ground, so he stayed put. Besides, it was his shadow. If he moved, it would just move with him. Now, think of the place you want to go. A place with plenty of shadows, and close to where you are now. Naruto looked over to the largest tree on the western side of the clearing. It was a good 100 yards away, and was casting a suitably huge shadow in the afternoon sun. Now picture yourself walking through the doorway you made earlier, and coming out at your destination on the other side. It will feel very weird the first couple of times, like the sense of vertigo in an elevator times 10, but you'll get the hang of it. Naruto envisioned himself walking through the doorway and stepping out near the tree. He felt the ground beneath him disappear and be replaced with something not quite solid. Then he felt himself beginning to sink. Once he felt his head go under, he had to resist the urge to open his eyes and see where he was. He had a feeling that whatever he saw would break his concentration. And the last thing he wanted was to be trapped in, wherever the hell he was now. Soon, he felt himself start to rise again. True to Kyuubi's words, it felt like being in an elevator when it came to a stop on a designated floor. He felt his head break the surface back into the normal world, and noticed a marked difference that he hadn't really paid attention to on the way down. Down there, everything was off. He had smelled something that resembled the smells of nature, but they weren't exactly right. If he had to put a word to it, Naruto would say it smelled artificial. Like something trying to imitate the earth, grass and trees, but not getting it quite right. Even the air itself gave off the same vibe. It felt similar and it was still breathable, but it wasn't really air. Naruto decided not to dwell on it as he felt the return to solid ground and sure footing. He opened his eyes and stared at the tree just 5 feet in front of him. The same tree that had been about 300 feet away just a few seconds ago. "Whoa," was all he could say. Whoa, indeed. That is called the shadow walk technique, just about the most basic in the darkness arsenal. So simple, there aren't even hand seals for it. Now, beyond being a means from point A to point B, the shadow walk also serves as a ride to the shadow realm. Now I don't know whole lot about it, but I do know that it's the home of the darkness boss spirit. And time passes faster there than it does here, though I'm not sure by how much. But back to the technique. You should practice the shadow walk until requires no concentration, like the kawarimi or body flicker. Just mold the chakra, think of where you want to go, and go. Now admittedly I don't know a lot about the technique, or any of the others for that matter. I can't use them, so all I know is what I've been told. So I'll be learning right along with you in most cases. However, it's not that big of a deal, really. Darkness is controlled completely by your mind and will. You think it, the darkness does it. It's not like the other elements, where you need to use hand seals and precise commands to make sure they don't do anything you don't want them to. So whenever you get time, mess around a little, see what you can come up with. Who did you learn all this from? Naruto knew it was more than likely a fellow demon, someone unreachable for himself. But it was worth a try. Mostly the four-tailed demon lord, Riju. He was a bad demon with a very strong darkness affinity. He was a very wise demon, very kind as well. Always willing to teach and explain. Naruto could hear the fondness in Kyuubi's voice. You said, was. Did something happen to him? No one really knows. Rumor has it that a group of very powerful humans, professional demon hunters, captured him. Others say that they just weakened him and he went into hiding. But all of the explanations seem to include the same group of humans, so I assume that they are somehow involved with Riju's disappearance. Though, I doubt that any human could defeat him. You are stronger than him, but you were still defeated. Naruto pointed out. Kyuubi snorted. I was never defeated, I was tricked and sealed, by a god. I might add, because I was blinded by rage. A mistake on my part, I'll admit. But Riju was too level-headed to be caught with anything like that. He's far too cunning to be captured by humans, no matter how strong they are. Speaking of that, why were you so angry that night? What made you attack the village? Naruto had avoided asking those questions for years. It wasn't because he sensed it was a touchy subject. No, his reasons were more selfish than that. He had his own ideas as to the reasons for that tragic event, and they were part of what allowed him to accept Kyuubi so readily. He saw her as a demon that, while not exactly noble, didn't do things without a reason. She wasn't some mindless force of destruction, or some thrill killer that destroyed entire civilizations for shits and giggles. But what if that's exactly what had happened? What if the reality of the situation was that Kyuubi had been bored and Konoha just happened to be in her line of sight? What if she had set off the chain of events that had ruined his life, on a malevolent whim? Naruto didn't think he could take that. Kyuubi was the constant in his life, the only family he had ever known. She was so approachable and friendly. Always willing to help, always willing to listen. He didn't want his image of her to be irreparably shattered. Surprisingly unaware of Naruto's worries and inner conflict, Kyuubi sighed deeply. This was yet another thing she had been hoping to hold off indefinitely. But if anyone had the right to know, it was Naruto. With all that had happened to him because of her, the demoness was honestly surprised that he hadn't asked for an explanation sooner. That he hadn't demanded an explanation sooner. I once had a family. A maid and 3 children of my own. But, earlier on the day of my rampage, I was summoned by someone. To this day, I don't know who, or what, was responsible. All I know is that when I appeared, no one was there. Naturally, I was mad, and I took out my frustrations on a small section of a forest, then headed back home. When I got there, I found my family slaughtered. My kids' bodies were scattered about in pieces, but my mate was still alive when I found him. Unfortunately, there was nothing I could do for him. There was just too much venom in his bloodstream, and I had gotten back too late. From the injuries he had suffered, including to large puncture wounds on his neck, I knew it had to have been a snake that had done it. They have a very specific way of fighting and killing. But only 2 serpents in existence would have been large and powerful enough to take my mate down. Hashimata no Orochi, the 8-headed snake demon, and Manda, the boss of the snake summons. The sound of a soft sob made Naruto's eye twitch and his chest ache. And as if that weren't enough, my mate's last words were, "Find the snake." My family had fought valiantly, if the dozens upon dozens of dead shinobi were any indication, but it still wasn't enough. Most of those shinobi had the forehead protector with the symbol of your village, hence my reason for attacking. But there were others that bore a symbol that's not affiliated with any village that I know of. Naruto thought for a minute. The moment Kyuubi had mentioned Manda, the gears in his head started turning. But he had to be sure. Kyuubi, if the Hachibi had done it, you would have felt it, right? Something that strong, it would have been very hard to miss. Now that you mention it, that's right. That serpent would never suppress his power willingly, he's far too proud and arrogant. So it had to be Manda. While she was glad some of the pieces were starting to come together, it did her no good since she was trapped inside the very person she was talking to. Wait, you're onto something, aren't you? I think so. Tell me, the symbol that you didn't recognize, was it a musical note? Kyuubi didn't trust herself to speak. Naruto had it, the identity of the one who'd so ruthlessly slaughtered her innocent family. 12 years of wondering and speculating was all about to come to an end. Now it didn't matter that she was sealed, she had to know. That's the symbol of a village that cropped up some 5 years ago. They call themselves, Otogakure no Sato, the Hidden Sound Village. Though there's no concrete proof, it's all but certain that the village is run by Orochimaru, Konoha's most notorious nuke nen. He was part of a trio of cage-level ninjas known as the Sannin, former students of the Sandaime Hokage. I know you don't care about all the details, so I'll only tell you the one that matters. Orochimaru is one of only 2 people known to have signed the snake summoning contract. And though Mitarashi Anko could probably do it now, 12 years ago Orochimaru was the only person on the planet who could summon Manda. For nearly 5 full minutes, the only sounds Naruto could hear out of Kyuubi were low, rumbling growls. Finally, she spoke. Naruto, if we ever encounter this Orochimaru, I will take over and kill him. I will have my revenge. With or without your consent. Naruto nodded. Kyuubi didn't often use his name, and when she did, it was safe to assume she was mad or very, very serious. And Kyuubi was beyond mad now. In fact, there probably wasn't even a word to describe how she felt. After a long silence, Naruto decided to speak up. Q-chan, I apologize for bringing up such painful memories. No, it's alright. If I hadn't said anything, I wouldn't have the information I do now. It may not seem like much, but just knowing who did it, it's a big step towards closure for me. So thank you, Naruto. That gave Naruto pause. He had never been thanked for anything. Ever. In fact, whenever he did something nice for someone else, he usually got the exact opposite of a thank you, if anything at all. Why you're welcome. Kyuubi giggled. It had been years since she'd heard Naruto stutter. You know what, Kit? I think you've earned a reward. Reward? Naruto cocked his head slightly in confusion. Yes, think of it as a gift from your sensei. Take out a blank scroll. Naruto took out a blank scroll from a pouch on the front of his armored tactical vest. Now unroll it and sit it on the ground. Cut your hand and place it on the scroll, I'll do the rest. Naruto took out a kunai and sliced open his hand, not even flinching at the pain. He placed his bleeding hand on the blank scroll and felt Kyuubi's chakra pulse through his body. It leaked out of his wound, not healing it as it usually would, instead going into the scroll itself. His blood seemed to soak into the paper, then red writing started to appear, spiraling outward from his hand. Naruto didn't recognize the writing at all. It might as well have been hieroglyphs, with the strange symbols, squiggly lines and things that looked vaguely like letters. Now that that's done, form the demon seals I'm about to show you. Then slam your hand into the contract. Kyuubi had trained Naruto in demon seals for 3 years now, and he had mastered all but the weirdest of them. Some of them he just didn't have the proper hands for. He went through the seals that appeared in his mind's eye and slammed his hand into the scroll. The writing on the contract began to glow, then it spread out over the ground, arranging itself into intricate patterns in a 5-foot circle around the contract. There was a large plume of smoke as the technique completed, accompanied by the almost overpowering stench of sulfur. Thankfully, Naruto's mask was an authentic hunter combat mask. This meant it came with an air filter that could be activated with a single thought. Once the smoke cleared, Naruto could clearly see what he had summoned. Instead of some demonic entity awaiting instructions from its new master, it appeared to be body armor. Jet black and polished almost to a mirror sheen, it looked like it had never been worn before, let alone seen battle. The set consisted of clawed gauntlets, vambraces, a cuirass, greaves and a skull-themed helmet. Cool. Naruto nodded in appreciation, liking the sleek, streamlined design of the armor. Not just for the aesthetics, but because it looked like it was relatively lightweight and easy to move around in. I know. It's in its dormant state right now, so you'll have to activate it to continue. And I do that, how? Touch it. What will it do? It'll turn into black slime, latch onto your body, assimilate your clothing and armor, then replicate it perfectly. Kyuubi replied, intentionally sounding sarcastic. Naruto fell for it. Right. He then reached out and tapped the top of the helmet with a finger. Nothing happened. I think it's broken. Well, you've got to do more than just poke it. Now convinced that Kyuubi was just messing with him, Naruto rolled his eyes and grabbed the helmet. How's tea? Naruto recoiled as the helmet, as well as the rest of the armor, melted and attached itself to his hand. See? Told ya. Seeing no reason to doubt his teacher's words, Naruto squashed his desire to get the black sludge off. Instead, he merely watched its progress as it crawled its way up his right arm, across his torso and down his left arm. God, this feels weird. Naruto mumbled as the slime began to cover his legs. Just like Kyuubi said, he could feel the slime dissolving his clothes and absorbing them into itself. It wasn't until the strange substance started going north that Naruto started to worry. He didn't care about his outfit being replicated or whatever, but he did not want the stuff doing the same thing to his mask. Hold it. Stop. Stop. Much to Naruto's surprise, the slime actually stopped about halfway up his neck. What's wrong? The mask? Naruto didn't really know how to explain it, as the concept of sentimental value had been foreign and meaningless to him for years. But Kyuubi understood perfectly. The mask had been a gift from the only true friend Naruto ever had. Well, true human friend, anyway. It wouldn't matter if the new mask would end up looking 100% identical to the old one, or that it would be upgraded in every conceivable way. The thought that the mask she gave him would be gone forever and he'd be left with a replica was a deal-breaker. Luckily, there was a way around that. I get it, don't worry. If you don't want an entirely new mask, would you settle for giving your current one an upgrade? Kyuubi proposed. Certainly, as long as the end result is still my mask. It will be. As you know now, the armor responds to your commands. You think it, the armor does it. Just have the armor cover the mask, like a coat of resin, or something. You won't get all the benefits of the full-on replica, and it will add some mass, but the mask will be more durable and self-repairing. Deal. Naruto replied without hesitation, then set about giving the armor a set of very specific commands. Mostly along the lines of, do not absorb the mask. The armor proved to be a very good listener, as it did exactly as told, attaching itself to the mask without assimilating it. Naruto noticed the mask was heavier, but it wasn't anything to be concerned with. How much longer will the rest of this take? Naruto asked, eager to get back to training. A couple more minutes, tops. If not for what you like to wear, it would already be done. With normal clothing, the armor would only have to assimilate, analyze and replicate 2, maybe 3 types of fabric, along with dyes and whatnot. But Naruto's clothing was far from normal. Everything he wore was made specifically for ninjas. Gloves, shirt, vest, pants, boots, even his cloak, all of it. None of the fabrics were as they seemed. Just by feeling the material of his pants, one would assume that they were made or normal cotton. It was virtually impossible to tell that it was actually a composite fabric, made from things that were composite materials in and of themselves. So, instead of something like a cotton-polyester blend, the armor had to perfectly replicate literally dozens of individual materials. Still a relatively simple matter for something so advanced, but it still took time. Again, true to Kyuubi's words, Naruto was clad in an exact clone of his normal outfit. All black, it consisted fingerless weighted knuckle gloves, a long-sleeved compression shirt, an Enbo-issued tactical vest, and cargo pants tucked into shin-high steel-toed combat boots. It was perfect in every way. The weight, the texture, even the smell was spot on. Actually, it was better. Everything moved with him, as if every part was attached to his skin. Nothing shifted out of place or rode up uncomfortably. This was most obvious with his pants. He tucked them into his boots for the same reasons many shinobi tape theirs around their shins or ankles, to cut down on loose fabric and to keep things from getting inside. But he favored a clean, tapered look that was ruined with his pant legs inevitably rode up, often unevenly. He had never been one to get caught up in aesthetics, but this one thing irked him to no end. But now, since the boots and pants were technically all one piece, and stretched to accommodate his movements, he'd never have to worry about it again. Okay, I'm impressed. Naruto nodded in appreciation. That's it? Just impressed. I am in awe of this monumental innovation in the field of personal protection. Your genius is unrivaled, and I am humbled just by being in your presence. Better? Much. Now then, about the armor. I call it the biosuit. I wanted to use an acronym, but they're a pain in the ass. I originally created it as a standard suit of armor, but I decided that was too simple. Too ordinary. So, I created a semi-organic armor that can do everything one could possibly want it to. Different forms, style changes, new outfit for a mission. The biosuit will take care of it all. It's even self-cleaning, Kyuubi explained. Very nice. But as far as actual protection goes, how is it superior to my old armor? Naruto asked. If it had the exact same properties, then it stood to reason that it would provide the exact same level of protection. Which actually wasn't much, all things considered. The standard Anbu issue armor provided excellent protection, within a certain context. The ceramic composite armor plates that provided the primary defense within the tactical vest were incredibly strong for their weight. But by nature they couldn't take as much punishment as a hunk of solid steel or titanium alloy. This was why the vests were commonly known as flak jackets, since shrapnel and other relatively low-mass, low-velocity projectiles were just about the only things they'd actually block. While you'd need to go into full armor mode to get maximum protection, the biosuit is quite capable even in its current state. It reacts to impacts and hardens almost instantly when anything touches it with any significant force. In mere nanoseconds, it can go from being soft as velvet, to several times harder than steel, depending on the amount and type of force imparted. Kyuubi was very proud of that factoid. To test it, Naruto slammed his fist into his chest. Instead of the muffled thunk of his knuckles meeting the fabric and armor plates of the vest, Naruto was greeted by more of knock, as if he had hit a solid stone wall. Which wasn't far off from what it felt like, firm and unyielding like a block of concrete. This just keeps getting better. Naruto thought, unable to keep a smirk off his face. He couldn't wait to try it out in actual combat. It gets better. There was another project developed alongside the biosuit. A semi-organic cloak with all the same capabilities as the biosuit and more. That's a separate summon, so you'll need another scroll. XX. It had taken longer than Naruto had expected to get comfortable with the living cloak. Literally, as the constant undulations felt incredibly weird. But seeing what it could do and getting used to controlling it had been the most time-consuming processes. 2 hours, to be exact. It was more than worth the time, though, as the cloak would certainly be an invaluable asset in the field. But now it was time to get back to the reason Naruto had come to this private training ground in the first place. Alright, onto the next technique. You're already more than familiar with the shadow clone technique, but now you'll learn a super-powered version of it, the darkness clone technique. It's the same principle as the normal shadow clone, but it uses demon seals. These clones can take tremendous amounts of punishment before being dispelled, around 100 hits, 3, not including lethal shots. An added benefit is that they can alter their form at will. By default, they'll be identical to you. But being made of darkness, by nature they have no set shape. This means that they can literally turn into just about anything, or anyone, without using a henge. Clone techniques were already among the most versatile in any ninja's arsenal. But the darkness clones could do things that couldn't even be dreamed of with any other type. It was yet another thing that made Kyuubi envious of those who could wield the darkness element. Here goes. Naruto once again performed the hand seals flashing through his mind's eye flawlessly. But nothing happened. Oh, I forgot one of the few limitations of the darkness clone technique. You can only spawn clones from shadows, and that won't change no matter how good you get. It's barely an inconvenience, but it's something to keep in mind nonetheless. Find a suitable shadow, focus on it, and try again. Naruto did as instructed, and was relieved to see a black mask come up out of the shadow. Once it reached a height similar to his own, it stopped growing and began to morph into a humanoid shape. Seconds later, a perfect replica of Naruto was standing in front of the original. Naruto walked up to his clone and hit it in the face. A blow like that would have easily dispelled a shadow clone, but this one barely budged. Instead, it hit him back even harder. Both Narutos smirked behind their masks and the real Naruto dispelled the clone, noting that it dissolved into a kind of black dust instead of going poof. Excellent. Naruto chuckled. These darkness clones were leaps and bounds ahead of the other types of clones he could create. Not only were they more covert, with no puff of smoke or anything of the like to give away their presence, but their durability was sure to be a nasty surprise to his future opponents. He also noted that his mask had absorbed the impact far better than it ever had in his spars with shadow clones. Aside from the torque on his neck, he'd barely felt that punch. And a quick check with his fingers confirmed that the mask was undamaged as well. That was a massive plus for Naruto. The mask meant a lot to him, which made him very wary about wearing it on missions when he was finally graduated from the academy and was assigned to a team. But now that the risk of it being broken or otherwise damaged was lessened, that was one less thing to worry about on missions. Good, but a bit slow. Practice the technique until you can make them at the same pace as the shadow clones. And for future reference, the darkness clones also have the memory transfer feature of the shadow clones, so be careful about dispelling too many at once. XX. Being a more advanced technique than the shadow clone, there was an understandably steeper learning curve. Where the shadow clone had taken Naruto all of 20 minutes to master, the darkness clone had taken a full hour. But he had done it, and it was time to move on. Kyuubi's next lessons nearly had him drooling. They were demon skills. Techniques created by demons, for demons. Of course, he wouldn't really be able to practice them now, but just the thought of knowing them had Naruto about as close to giddy as he could possibly be. Well, let's get started. The first demon skill you'll be learning is Stormbringer. This technique will allow you to summon a localized thunderstorm and control the intensity and duration. I'll warn you now, this technique will take your skills in elemental manipulation and multitasking to the limits. Luckily, once you're able to control the wind, rain and lightning simultaneously, you won't really have to do anything else. Your opponent will be more concerned with the lightning bolts, hurricane force winds and a monsoon-like downpour. As he memorized the demon seals, Naruto also thought of ways to implement the technique in battle. It wasn't something to use casually, and it was far from instantaneous, even after the long string of seals. That being the case, any foe strong enough to make him resort to the Stormbringer would have to be distracted to give him the time to pull it off. Not the most practical of moves, but Naruto certainly wasn't going to complain about it. The next is a real powerhouse, the Black Fire Dragon. In both principle and appearance, it's similar to techniques like the Fire Dragon Flame Missile. But unlike other, draconic, attacks, this one is a fire and forget deal. Once it's given a target, it won't stop until it hits, or is countered somehow. It won't explode on contact with anything else, unless you will it, and will either plow through or go around obstacles in its path. You can still actively control it, but you don't really have to. It's a fire-darkness combination technique, of course, and that darkness element gives it another special property: it's unaffected by water. Now being hit head-on by a particularly powerful water technique will cause it to explode, but the water itself won't snuff it out. I would let you try this one out, but I don't think it's a good idea. If the Yuki didn't attract attention, the resulting explosion most certainly would. Naruto practiced the seals, but heeded Kyuubi's warning. But he had to admit he was curious as to what a technique with that kind of power could do. This last technique, to be honest, I don't even want to teach it to you. It's a suicide technique, plain and simple. The Hellfire Dragon. Kyuubi let out a shuddering breath. She had seen the move in person, courtesy of the very being who had taught it to her. It was truly a terrifying thing to behold. Basically, combine the Funkaku 4 with the Blackfire Dragon, and you get that. No, never mind. I don't even know why I brought it up. Forget I even mentioned it. I'll show you the Leviathan's Wake. It's a crowd control attack that creates a huge 360-degree wall of water that spreads outward from you. Again, I'll show you the seals, but don't use it. You'd end up drowning everything in a quarter-mile radius. Just as well, I don't think I would want to use it right now. Naruto said with a mental shrug. Water techniques had always been abnormally taxing on him, even considering that it wasn't one of his main elements. Time passed by in a blur for the masked boy as he engrossed himself in a somewhat downtoned version of his normal training regimen. It was still batshit crazy even by most shinobi standards, but there was a distinct lack of fiery explosions, flying debris and falling trees. But with the addition of his newly acquired darkness clones, the training was actually even more intense than usual. He was so used to the clones going poof after one hit, that he found himself being blindsided more than a few times when the clones just bounced back from all but the most deadly of attacks. By the time he had paused for a break, the sun was little more than a pinkish-orange beacon of light just below the western horizon. Today was a good day, Naruto said aloud as he stretched, letting out small groans of relief with every pop and crack produced by his joints. The only downside was that he didn't get to try out his new demon skills. Of course he knew and agreed with the reasons he couldn't use the techniques at the moment, but even so Naruto couldn't help but be a little disappointed. He had the power to unleash untold devastation right at his fingertips, but he couldn't indulge even a little. Kyuubi decided that this was the perfect time to tease the boy. Whittle Narutokins doesn't get to destroy anything today. It's alright, you'll get your chance. Yes you will, yes you will. Naruto's right eyebrow twitched wildly under his mask. That was just too creepy, even for you. Hey, I resent that. Besides, who are you to talk about creepy? You're the definition of the word. Hey, you're the one who decided on the look, I just took a liking to it. This, Naruto gestured to his outfit, is not my fault. Kyuubi thought about the boy's reply, then Naruto realized what he had walked into and groaned. Yeah, I guess it is my fault that you look so badass. I'm sorry, would you rather look like the emo king? Kyuubi sent Naruto a mental picture of what he would look like with Sasuke's clothes on, his hairstyle, and his permanent scowl. Naruto shuddered slightly. Don't ever do that again. And why not? Because I can always do worse to you. Naruto sent Kyuubi a mental image of Guy Meta in a speedo. Kyuubi shrieked and backed into the farthest corner of Naruto's mind, screaming, sorry, all the way. Naruto had gotten his revenge, but at a heavy price. I need a shower. A long, scalding hot shower. He said monotonously. He wanted to use the shadow walk to get to his apartment, but thought better of it. He didn't know what the technique's maximum range was, if it had one, but he figured he'd need a lot more practice to cover the 5 miles between the clearing and his home. So, he fell back on the old standby, the body flicker. Naruto's apartment. Immediately after stepping into his apartment, Naruto looked at the clock hanging above the kitchen entrance. By his own internal clock, it was around 9:30 p.m. According to the clock on the wall, it was 9:28 p.m. Any discrepancy of less than 5 minutes was acceptable, as per the words of the human sensei who taught Naruto how to set up his internal clock. As Naruto prepared to take his shower, he suddenly wished he hadn't sent Kyuubi into hiding. She had never told him if could take the biosuit off normally, or if there was some kind of special procedure involved. But, as it turned out, the biosuit continued to behave like normal clothing as he took it off, separating into all the proper pieces without so much as a single twitch. The cloak, on the other hand, required some convincing to relinquish its hold on its new owner. Even after he took it off, it followed him to the bathroom, slithering across the floor like a giant snake, until he told it to stay behind. Yeah, the cloak would take a lot of getting used to. On the plus side, Naruto couldn't wait to see other people's reactions to the cloak moving the way it did. Now, time for that shower. The next morning, Naruto had slept like a baby for the first time in, well, since he was a baby, probably. His nights were usually filled with frequent interruptions in his sleep. Whether it be restlessness due to energy he hadn't burned off, or noises in the middle of the night, Naruto rarely got a full night's sleep. That didn't really bother him, but now that he had gotten a good night's rest, he found himself wishing it happened more often. In fact, he almost wished he was asleep right now. Because that would mean that all the cold and contemptuous, or downright angry and hateful glares and whispers would all be part of a dream. And that would mean that he could kill the owners of every one of those eyes without even the most minor of consequences. Fortunately for the citizens of Konoha, Naruto was wide awake, and well aware of what would happen if he decided to lash out and kill someone unprovoked. So it simply ignored them, treating the people like background scenery as he made his way down the streets towards the academy. He was disappointed when he made it through the gates and into the building without incident. He had been looking forward to making an example out of the first fool to try and impede his progress. But he got his chance to put some fear in somebody when went by the receptionist's desk, where a female Chunin busy typing away at her keyboard, totally absorbed in whatever she was doing. If it had stayed that way, there wouldn't have been a problem. But as some 5 seconds after Naruto walked by her desk, her head shot up as she noticed him. "Oh, I'm sorry, She stopped the pleasantries when she noticed who she was talking to. "Oh, it's you," she spat. Naruto just waved his hand dismissively. "Yeah, it's me. I'm going to class now." Naruto walked off, but stopped when he heard the receptionist mutter, "Demon brat," under her breath. With a small smirk, Naruto slowly turned to look at the woman, who glared back defiantly. Using a trick Kyuubi had taught him, he sent some chakra into his eyes, causing them to glow a brilliant shade of blue. Shining through the eye slits of his mask, it made for a very eerie effect. Combined with a concentrated wave of killing intent, the receptionist never stood a chance. The young Chunin suddenly found it hard to breathe as she looked into the demon boy's glowing eyes. She coughed, taking her eyes off of him for just a second. When she looked back, he was gone, though the oppressive sense of dread remained. She soon learned why when a clawed hand wrapped itself around her mouth a split second before another erupted from her chest in a torrent of blood, bone and tissue. Satisfied with a lesson well taught, Naruto turned on his heel and walked his classroom. Behind him, he heard the receptionist retch and spill her breakfast into a trash can. XX. Iruka was not having a good day. It was graduation day and the students wouldn't settle down. He had tried everything short of attacking the children. The only ones who were even remotely calm were Sasuke, Shino and Shikamaru, but you could tell they were just as excited. Well, Sasuke was, anyway. With Shino, you could never tell what was on his mind. And Shikamaru, his snoring said all there was to say about his attitude towards graduation. Fortunately, the ultimate riot buster was just outside the classroom door. The moment that Iruka felt he was going to snap, and Mizuki moved to restrain him, Naruto walked into the room. The temperature seemed to drop several degrees and the students immediately clammed up. Mizuki outright scowled, while Uruka was torn between jumping for joy and chastising the boy for his tardiness. "So kind of you to join us, Mr. Uzumaki." Uruka settled on the latter. Naruto just snorted. "Your receptionist is a bitch, that's not my fault." The classroom gasped at Naruto's use of foul language. Sure, they all cursed at one point or another, especially Kiba, but they at least made an effort to watch what they said around the instructors. But Naruto? He just didn't care. "Watch your mouth, young man," Uruka shouted, even though he had seen how she treated Naruto on a daily basis. Naruto turned to Uruka, his masked face betraying absolutely nothing. But Uruka was one of the few people to know that the mask didn't make much of a difference. He had seen the boy's face, and he could honestly say he preferred the mask. Those soulless, predatory eyes still haunted his nightmares some nights. "My apologies, Uruka-sensei, but you know what I say is true." Naruto bowed to Uruka and just nodded to Mizuki, whose glare intensified. "Watch out for the white-haired one." Kyuubi yawned, having just woken up. "What for? There's nothing that insect can do to me." Naruto replied with a mental snorted as he made his way to his seat. "You know, Kit, those were my exact thoughts moments before my ceiling. Don't let your power go to your head. You may be an academy student with the power of a Jonin, but you can still be defeated. I know that all too well, Q-chan, but it will take far more than some third-rate academy instructor to beat me." Naruto took his seat 2 rows behind the Uchiha, or as Kyuubi called him, the Emo King. Naruto's uncanny ability to shut people up never ceased to amaze Uruka. What took him and other instructors minutes to do, took Naruto only seconds. Before Naruto became unofficial ruler of the classroom, Uruka had thought of asking Ibiki to come down to the class and put the fear of Kami into the kids. However, once the other students knew that Naruto wasn't going to kill anyone, they would start right back up again. So, just as he did every morning, Uruka made like a good shinobi and took full advantage of the momentary silence. "Alright then, now that the last student is here, we can begin with the exam." Uruka looked around the class and happily noted that most students were paying close attention to his every word, even Shikamaru. "Everyone except for our favorite masked demon child, Naruto Uzumaki." Uruka just sighed. There was nothing he could do for the child now. "Now then, you will all be called by alphabetical order to the front of the class. Here you will perform 3 techniques. A henge of the Sandaime Hokage, 3 standard clones, and another henge of your choice. First, Aburame Shino," and so, the class went on like this. Next up, Uchiha Sasuke. The Sasuke fan club instantly went crazy. "Go, Sasuke-kun, you can do it," one girl shouted. "Yeah, I'll bet Sasuke-kun can do over 100 clones," yelled another. "Sasuke-kun, you're the best," and yet another. Needless to say, Sasuke was soaking up all the attention like a sponge. "Alright, Sasuke, let's see how good your henge is," Uruka said. Sasuke nodded and did the proper seals. A muttering of henge later, and a perfect copy of the Sandaime stood at the front of the class, though he lacked a pipe and seemed to carry an air of arrogance and contempt. It didn't change when the boy released the illusion. "Good, now the clones." Sasuke nodded again. He made the seals and muttered, "Clone technique," and 10 perfect clones poofed into existence, then poofed out again. The Sasuke fan club went wild at the display of power. "Very nice. Now for the henge of your choice." Sasuke thought for a second, then did the hand seals while muttering again. In a puff of smoke there stood a perfect replica of Sasuke's late father, Fugaku Uchiha. "Very well done, Sasuke. You pass." Sasuke just smirked as Mizuki handed him his forehead protector. Next up, Uzumaki Naruto. Uruka called and the ever-silent masked boy walked to the front of the class. "Okay, Naruto, just a simple henge, and no freaky stuff." Naruto had a habit of screwing up his henge on purpose just to see what kind of abomination would spawn from it. The class got a big kick out of seeing an Uruka look-alike dressed as a geisha, makeup and all. And sure, Uruka often found himself laughing when it was Mizuki's turn to be the butt of the joke, but if there was ever a time for absolute seriousness in a classroom, today was it. Naruto crossed his arms under his cloak, then there was a puff of smoke. Where Naruto once stood, there was now a perfect copy of the Hokage, but with one difference, the eyes. The cold, unfeeling eyes. It wasn't right for the Hokage to have them, and it creeped everyone out to no end. Alright, Naruto, dispel the henge. Iruka shuddered. Clones, please, and no shenanigans. Naruto cocked his head to the side a bit. What about? No. Iruka interrupted the boy's question. Standard clones, nothing more, nothing less. The Jinchuriki grunted an affirmative, then took his hands out of his cloak and began checking his fingernails as 30 perfect Naruto clones appeared in puffs of smoke. Everyone was stunned. Naruto had just created 3 times as many clones as Sasuke, and he'd done it without the use of hand seals. They would have been even more stunned if they had known that these were actually shadow clones, not standard ones. What the hell? Was the collective thought of all that had watched the display. Sasuke clenched his fists and his jaw. There was someone stronger than him now, by a considerable margin, and he couldn't have that. Where did he get that kind of power? I must know, I'll beat it out of him if I have to, the last Uchiha thought angrily. Every student in the class knew that Naruto was powerful, but that wasn't the main reason they gave him such a wide berth. Maybe it was because he was tremendously creepy, or maybe it was because he became quite violent when sufficiently irritated, as Kiba found out the hard way, numerous times. Had they given it more thought, they'd have realized that it was something akin to an instinctual fear. Naruto, in school, was something like a large crocodile sunning itself on a riverbank. He just wanted to be left alone so he could go about his day. Sure, he looked mean and scary, but as long as you kept your distance, you were fine. And it was your natural instincts that made you keep your distance. However, if you chose to ignore those instincts and get too close, then you were just begging to get a limb torn off. But Naruto had never done anything, beyond beating Kiba up a few times, to suggest that he was that dangerous or that strong. Until today, that is. Apparently, Naruto had chosen today to give his classmates a small taste of just how far ahead of them he was. Iruka was the first to break the silence. Very good, Naruto. Time for the final part of the test. I'm curious to see who you chose as a henge. The instructor cracked a small smile, figuring that a Naruto's final school prank was coming. It only took a split second for Naruto to decide what to do. There was a puff of smoke that covered the boy. When it cleared, everyone gasped. Naruto had turned into a perfect clone of the fourth. But he still had the soulless eyes that creeped everyone out. You pass, dispel the henge. Mizuki said with a growling undertone. Naruto just took his forehead protector from Iruka and sat back down. After Naruto took his seat, Iruka began dividing up teams. Team 11. Asojo Kira, Tobako Rachi, Kariko Bara. Your Jonin sensei will be Mitarashi Anko. Iruka was amazed that the sadistic Jonin would even be allowed to have a genin team. Especially after that one time. Team 10. Nara Shikamaru, Yamanaka Ino, Akamichi Choji. Your Jonin sensei will be Sarutobi Asuma. Ino groaned softly when she was teamed with the lazy bum and the fat ass, though she dare not verbalize her dismay in front of Choji. Team 8. Hyuga Hinata, Inazuka Kiba, Aburame Shino. Your Jonin sensei will be Yuhi Kurenai. Iruka and Mizuki both blushed a little at the thought of the beautiful rookie Jonin. Team 7. Haruno Sakura, Uchiha Sasuke. Sakura squealed and jumped up. Sakura turned to Ino and stuck out her tongue. Take that, Ino pig, she taunted. Shut up, forehead girl. Ino sneered. Iruka cleared his throat loudly to get the two kunoichi to stop bickering. Thank you. The final member of Team 7 is Uzumaki Naruto. Your Jonin sensei will be Hitaki Kakashi. Sakura spared a frightened glance at Naruto and noticed that he was staring at her. As Iruka sounded off the rest of the teams, the members of Team 7 were having a stare down. Well, at least Sasuke was. Naruto was just holding Sasuke's glare unflinchingly, and Sakura was caught in the crossfire. Sasuke hinnied and turned back to his window gazing, brooding. Naruto glanced at Sakura one last time before looking out the window as well. Great, thought Naruto, I get stuck with the emo king and his number one fangirl. Well, I suppose it could be worse, though I don't see how. As the Jonin appeared to take their assigned students, the teams left one by one until Team 7 were the only ones left. Right now it was just them and Iruka in the classroom at the time, but then Iruka had to leave for a mission briefing and it was just Team 7. Arg, how can a ninja be so late? It's been 2 hours. Sakura raged. Well, if our sensei's reputation is anything to go by, we have about another hour of this. Naruto said, not really paying attention to his teammates ranting. What? This time it was both Sasuke and Sakura that yelled as they turned to Naruto. Hitaki Kakashi is infamous for his tardiness. As far as I know, he's never shown up for anything, barring direct orders from the Hokage, less than 2 hours late. So, he's either going to be another hour late, or he's going to walk in the door in 3, 2, 1, now. Naruto pointed offhandedly at the door just as a silver-haired man poked his head into the room. Are you guys Team 7? He asked, already knowing the answer. You're late, Sakura screamed. Sasuke glared, and Naruto just continued to stare out the window. Kakashi just smiled under his mask. My first impression is, I hate you. Meet me on the roof in 1 minute. With that, the man left. Naruto disappeared in a puff of black smoke, and the other two just took the stairs. Sasuke walked onto the roof a minute later, followed by Sakura. They saw their third teammate and their sensei already waiting for them. Alright then, let's get to know each other. Likes, dislikes, hobbies, goals. You go first, Pinky. Kakashi pointed at Sakura, who took slight offense at the nickname. My name is Haruno Sakura, I like. She glanced at Sasuke and giggled. I dislike Ino pig and creepy people. She tossed a slightly frightened glance at Naruto, who stared right back, his head cocked a little to his right. My hobbies are. She glanced at Sasuke and giggled again. My goal is. She glanced at Sasuke again and squealed loudly. A fangirl, great. Okay, you, the brooder, Kakashi said, pointing at Sasuke. HMPH. My name is Uchiha Sasuke, I like training in tomatoes. I dislike weak people and those who don't pull their own weight. I have no real hobbies. My goal? No, my ambition is to kill a certain man, and revive my clan. Sasuke could feel his pink-haired teammate staring at him, and it was making him uncomfortable. He was never one to shun admiration and/or praise, but he wasn't ashamed to admit that fangirls scared him sometimes. An Avenger, too, Doesn't look like much, but I can work with that. Good to know. Now you, creepy. Kakashi pointed at Naruto. My name is Uzumaki Naruto. My likes, I suppose just training and learning new techniques. My dislikes, people. I suppose my only hobby would be collecting. As for my goals, I can't say I really have any. Naruto said, staring right into his new teacher's lone exposed eye. Kakashi's sweat dropped lightly. If you have no goals, then, why are you here? Naruto cocked his head slightly to the left. Isn't that a question that everyone asks themselves at some point? I asked that question sooner than most. And I'm here because I feel that this is the path that will lead me to an answer. So, I have a rabid fangirl, and fledgling Avenger, and an unfeeling machine. Oh, joy. Kakashi mentally sighed. Alrighty then, meet at Training Ground 7 for your first assignment tomorrow morning, 7 AM sharp. See ya, then. Oh, and don't eat breakfast, you'll just puke. The masked Jonin then disappeared in a puff of smoke before anyone could say anything. Wait, damn it, we didn't get any info on him at all. Sakura screamed. Sasuke just scoffed and went back to his brooding, but he was interrupted by Sakura asking him if he wanted to go out and get some food. So, how about it, Sasuke-kun? The pink-haired girl asked hopefully. No, Sasuke replied flatly. Naruto didn't find this at all amusing, so he took off, leaping from rooftop to rooftop. He decided to open a mind link with Kyuubi. Hey, Q-chan, you awake? Yeah, what do you need, Kit? Nothing really, just wanted someone to talk to that wasn't a complete moron. Kyuubi giggled, a strange sound for a demon to make. So, what do you want to talk about? Naruto shrugged. I don't know, anything to guess. Naruto didn't really analyze the situation, if he had he wouldn't have said that. Kyuubi grinned. Anything Well, Kit, I think it's about time we had the talk. Naruto groaned loudly. Haven't we already had that conversation before? Yes, but you passed out before I even got 10 minutes into it. Kyuubi giggled. I was 9 years old for crying out loud. That was highly inappropriate. Naruto's eyes widened and he almost faltered in his jumps, nearly crashing into a building. Those were all your fault, you know. When you keep sending me perverted images, how am I not supposed to think about it? I am a guy after all, but that doesn't mean I am a pervert. Ah, you're no fun. Kyuubi pouted. Naruto shook his head. So, we gonna have the talk, or what? Kyuubi grinned like the fox she was. Sure kid, if you think you're ready for it. I won't hold anything back, not even the weird stuff. I think I've already proven that I can take anything you throw at me. Just let me find a place to stop. 3 hours later, Naruto sat on the floor of his apartment, blankly staring into space. It took his brain a while to process what Kyuubi had told him, as it kept stopping to analyze certain sections of the talk, mostly to figure out if they were physically possible. Some aspects of that sound unpleasant. Naruto wasn't sure if he had even blinked in the 3 hours since the speech started. Some of them are, like the initial penetration of a virgin girl. But most of it, if not all of it in some cases, is quite pleasant, I assure you. In secret, Kyuubi had begun to see Naruto as more than a little brother or a kid. He was quickly becoming potential mate material. Anyway, I'm glad they have birth control technique, the last thing I want is kids. Naruto sighed heavily. Kyuubi's heart sank a little at the boy's statement. Why not? I don't want my kids living the same horrible life I have. I don't want them to forever be known, the children of the demon, or something like that. If I ever do have children, they certainly won't be born in this village. Semi-emotionless, though he was, Naruto still wouldn't wish his childhood on anyone, let alone his own children. Well, you'll have a long time to think about it, Kyuubi said. Indeed, Naruto would have a long time to think. Kyuubi had told him that when he and herself merged partially 4 years ago that Naruto was now a half-demon. And with his extensive training, he was on his way to full demon status. And one of the many perks of that status was a very, very long life. Immortality, as far as most mortals would be concerned. Kyuubi had thought Naruto would have been happy with the news, so she was taken completely by surprise when he had freaked out, as if she had told him he was going to die in a week. There were parts of the Forest of Death that still hadn't recovered from his rampage. But Naruto eventually calmed down, though he never explained why he had thrown such a tantrum in the first place. Perhaps he didn't even know why he'd done it himself. But with the knowledge that quasi-infinite longevity was within his grasp, plans began to form. Plans more grandiose than anything he had dared to dream of before. Things like learning every technique, traveling the entire world, especially the unexplored West, and finding a way to undo the seal that held Kyuubi captive within him. She had given him so much, more than he had ever thought he'd be able to repay, but now there was a chance. A chance for him to give her the ultimate gift in return for all she had done for him, freedom. Kyuubi didn't have the heart to tell him that. Quite frankly, she probably didn't need him for that. If she truly wanted it, and really put her mind to it, she had no doubt that she could get out. But the chances of Naruto surviving the event were dismally low. She couldn't do that to him. Before, it was because her soft spot for children and her own moral code wouldn't allow for it, regardless of how strong her thirst for vengeance was. And now, she was simply too attached to her vessel, her student, her friend, and more. That was a sacrifice she was not willing to make, even for the sake of freedom. Fortunately, unbeknownst to Naruto, things had changed within the seal, coinciding with the changes in him. Kyuubi, though still captive, was far less restricted than before. She was no longer confined to her cage, and was free to wander around Naruto's mind nearly unhindered. Some areas she avoided because her presence there would certainly alert Naruto, and other places were blocked off entirely. She could force her way through, but she would never risk it, not knowing what kind of damage such a thing might do. She hadn't told Naruto, but she often found herself imagining his reaction to the news. The one that kept popping up was enough to make her hold off on telling him. Fear of what she could do to his mind, giving such free rein, and suspicion about what she may have already done. Neither of them needed any of that. I guess. Naruto sighed. So, should I train, or take the day off? Kyuubi snorted. Do whatever you want. Train, sleep, get laid, whatever. Kyuubi giggled at the last part. Naruto rolled his eyes. He had been dealing with this for years, but he had never really known what she had meant until now. Sleeping sounds tempting, but I'm not tired at all. Maybe I should see what my teammates are up to. Naruto walked out of his apartment, not bothering to lock his door. He had set some traps that were undetectable to the normal human eye, though the Byakugan or the Sharingan could see them. Kyuubi had told Naruto about some especially effective traps, and Naruto wanted to try them out. As such, This may have been the one time in his short life that he wanted someone to break into his apartment and try to trash it. One trap used chakra-charged fire to burn anything that wasn't protected by a special seal. A seal that was drawn or carved into everything Naruto possessed in the apartment. Naruto was almost expecting to come home to a charred corpse, or pile of ashes, and an apartment that smelled like barbecue. Naruto decided to just wander around the village, ignoring the cold, hate-filled glares from civilians and shinobi alike. If Naruto's mind hadn't been broken all those years ago, he most likely would have snapped and destroyed the village, or would have been killed in the process. Kyuubi knew this, which is why she didn't even attempt to try and fix it, which she probably couldn't, since the fourth seal prevented Kyuubi's chakra from directly affecting Naruto's mind in any way. Meanwhile, the Uchiha we all loved to hate was desperately trying to shake off his number one fangirl, Sakura Haruno. She had been on his back ever since their new sensei and their creepy teammate had left them alone. Come to think of it, I didn't even feel Creepshow leave. Damn it, Sasuke clenched his fists tightly. He can't be stronger than me. I'll show him, I'll show everybody what it means to be an Uchiha. At this exact moment Sasuke and his pink-haired parasite came to a crossroad and someone walked in front of them. He had on a white hunter-like mask with the kanji for 3 elements carved into it. His hood was up, hiding the rest of his head, and his black cloak seemed to flutter in a non-existent breeze. Naruto turned to the people who were watching him, seeing none other than his new teammates, the Uchiha bastard and his rabid fangirl. Uchiha-san, Haruno-san. Naruto nodded to them and proceeded to walk off, content to find that his teammates weren't doing anything of interest, but a voice behind him stopped him. Wait, Naruto turned to face a seemingly angry Sasuke. What do you want? I'm busy. It was sort of true, Naruto did have something to do, and that was to find something to do. Naruto's response seemed to have angered the Uchiha even more. Fight me, right now, Sasuke demanded. Almost instantaneously a crowd gathered, most, if not all, wanting to see the last Uchiha beat the crap out of the demon brat. Naruto just sighed. And why should I do that? Because I demand it. Fight me, Sasuke yelled. Naruto scoffed. You are nothing but a spoiled brat, always expecting to get your way because you are the last Uchiha. You have absolutely no power over me, so I don't have to do anything you ask or order me to. You are nothing to me. Naruto turned away from the enraged black-haired boy. The crowd cheered the Uchiha on, which included the official Sasuke fan club. Come on, Sasuke, kick his ass, one girl yelled, which was echoed by others. Beat the demon boy, shouted one of the adult members of the fan club. Ha, that little monster could never defeat an Uchiha. Naruto didn't let the shouts and insults get to him. He just shrugged and continued on his way, not stopping even when Sasuke insulted him. What's wrong, are you scared? Sasuke smirked. That line worked on damn near every male, but not the masked freak. He just kept walking. Sasuke growled and got ready to charge the cloaked boy, but Sakura stopped him. Come on, Sasuke-kun, you shouldn't beat up teammates, no matter how creepy they are. The young Kunoichi said while standing in front of Sasuke. Sasuke just growled louder and pushed her aside before lunging at Naruto. To Naruto, Sasuke couldn't have been more obvious even if he'd been wielding a chainsaw. I don't have time for this. Yes you do. There is always time to knock an asshole off his high horse. Kyuubi chimed in. Good point. Naruto agreed. Just as Sasuke's flying kick was about to connect with the back of Naruto's head, the boy whirled with speed that no genin should possess and caught Sasuke by the ankle. Naruto then swung the Uchiha over his head and smashed him into the ground, shattering the hard surface dirt. Naruto then held his rival up by the same ankle and, after seeing that he was out cold, carelessly flung the boy into a patch of thorn bushes at the side of the street. Kyuubi laughed in Naruto's head. Ha 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 ha, he'll probably spend 2 hours picking thorns out of his ass. The fox continued to laugh. Naruto just shook his head as the Sasuke fan club ran to the aid of their obsession. Sasuke-kun, speak to me. Sakura glared at Naruto. What was that for? Naruto shrugged. He attacked me first, I tried to walk away. Don't blame me if he was too weak to take a hit. He shouldn't start fights that he has no hope of winning. With that Naruto disappeared in a puff of black smoke. Hours later, Sarutobi sighed. The council was on his back again. Of course, demanding the death of the Kyuubi brat, Naruto Uzumaki, or at least severe punishment. Currently in his office, the masked genin himself, along with his team. So Naruto, it says here that you viciously assaulted Sasuke Uchiha. Is this true? The Sandame already knew it wasn't, but he was obligated to ask regardless. Naruto shook his head. No, Hokage-sama. The Uchiha instigated the altercation by challenging me. I tried to walk away, but he attacked me from behind. I merely defended myself. He left out the part about the thorn bush, knowing the Hokage was already aware of it. Sarutobi nodded. Alright, that's your story, but I cannot ask Sasuke, as he is currently in the hospital having. The Hokage didn't know how to continue without offending the boy. But Naruto didn't have such worries. He's currently having the thorns removed from his ass, correct? Sarutobi just sighed and nodded. Since he is not here, I'll have to ask someone that was present for the fight. He was reluctant to actually call that a fight. He had seen the entire thing on his scrying orb and had laughed quite hard when the Uchiha was tossed into the bushes. But he couldn't tell the council this, as they would just say that he was defending Naruto because he had a soft spot for the boy. The third turned to Sakura. Haruno Sakura, was it? He asked. Sakura nodded. That is correct, Hokage-sama. You were present for the fight, correct? May I have your side of the story? Sakura instantly cast an angry glare at Naruto. Sasuke-kun was injured by this monster for no reason. She hissed. Naruto clenched his fists hard, crushing the armrests on the chair he was sitting on. Who the hell was she to call him a monster based on one account of self-defense? Naruto wanted to yell in outrage, but he knew that it would do no good and make him look like a fool. Plus, Naruto knew that the Hokage had been watching the fight, as he constantly felt like he was being watched by someone or something that he couldn't quite identify. Naruto had felt this many times before, but it had taken him all of 10 years to figure out exactly what, or rather who, it was. Sarutobi narrowed his eyes for a split second. But how can it be Naruto's fault if Sasuke initiated the attack in the first place? Wouldn't that count as self-defense on Naruto's part? Sarutobi made it sound like he was talking to a 5-year-old, but even a child would know the difference between self-defense and an outright unprovoked attack. Sakura gulped hard. She had absolutely no way to back up her statement, having no proof that Naruto had actually attacked Sasuke. This did not go unnoticed by the Sandame. I suppose you have proof of your statement, then? He raised an old eyebrow. Sakura just sank down into her seat. No sir, I have no proof. Sarutobi nodded, then turned to Kakashi. And what did you see, Hitaki-san? Kakashi had been feeling kind of left out of the conversation, so he did what he always did when he was bored. He pulled out his porno book and started reading. But when his name was called, it was like the book never existed. I heard Sasuke yell out, "Fight me," and I saw a large crowd gather around Naruto and Sasuke, so I went to check it out. I would have stopped it, but I was kind of hoping to see some of Naruto's abilities, since I have absolutely no idea what he is capable of. I didn't get to see much, though. Naruto walked out of the crowd. Sasuke came out after him and, as Naruto said, attempted to blindside him. Naruto countered the attack and slammed Sasuke into the ground, rendering him unconscious on impact, then tossed him into a patch of thorn bushes. He said something to Sakura, then disappeared. Kakashi finished his formal report, all traces of the slacker from this morning gone for the moment. Sarutobi nodded. Thank you, Hitaki-san. Then he turned to Naruto. Well, it seems that you were not at fault, so there will be no charges leveled against you. Sarutobi smiled a little. With Kakashi's report, the council had nothing. Naruto just nodded, then looked at his new sensei. Is there anything else, Hitaki-sensei? The masked Jonin contemplated his answer for a second, then shook his head. No, your training doesn't start until tomorrow. So you all have the rest of the day off. Naruto nodded and stood to leave, then turned to Sakura and made his eyes glow while using a small amount of heavily concentrated killing intent on the girl, leaving her unable to look away. The next time you see the Uchiha, give him this message. Do not start what you cannot finish. You'll live longer. With that, Naruto walked out of the Hokage's office. Sarutobi chuckled. Words to live by. He turned to Kakashi. If there is nothing else, you are dismissed. Kakashi bowed and grabbed a still frozen Sakura, then exited the Hokage's office while dragging the girl behind him. As Naruto exited the Hokage tower, one of his greatest enemies struck: boredom. Yes, Naruto Uzumaki, vessel and apprentice of the greatest demon in existence, was bored out of his mind. What to do, what to do, what to do? Naruto began his boredom chant. Kyuubi began to sweat, she knew this chant well. When Naruto said, "What to do?" 30 times in a row, he usually started pestering her, followed by acts of random destruction. He was sometimes joined in his rampage by the insane snake women, Anko. I have to figure out a way to stop him. And fast, he's already at 22. Kyuubi thought frantically. The closer Naruto got to 30, the closer something got to oblivion. Kyuubi knew that the villagers used any and all excuses to call for Naruto's execution, exile, or severe public punishment. And with the things he may do in his state of mind-numbing boredom, the villagers may very well get their wishes. Come on Kyuubi, think, think, think. Kyuubi was poking herself in the forehead with one of her tails. The proverbial light bulb went off in her head. That's it, she shouted out, but not meaning to. Naruto stopped walking and chanting, stopping right at 29. What's it? He asked Kyuubi, willing to listen to almost anything to get rid of his boredom. Kyuubi grinned evilly. You could always get a date for the evening. Naruto would have choked on the air he was breathing, if he was normal. But being not so normal, he just cocked his head to the side slightly. What now? Kyuubi's sweat dropped. A date, you know? Find a girl and go out with her, take her someplace nice. The movie theater, a restaurant, something like that. Naruto sighed a little. Kyuubi, you know I'm not allowed in those places. And even if I was, who wants to go out with the freak? Naruto wasn't at all fazed by this, but Kyuubi was. Sometimes I wonder how he can take all of this and still stay loyal to Konoha. I would have gone on a killing spree a long time ago, or at least left the village, but that's just me. He doesn't know of his father yet, so why does he stay? He says that he has no one to protect here, so why does he stay? He says he has nothing here but the hatred of the village, so why the fuck does he stay? Kyuubi began the growl without knowing it. Naruto paused his walk and cocked his head again. Q-chan, are you alright? Kyuubi smiled a little at her nickname. Yeah, Kit, just thinking about that snake bastard, Orochimaru, and what I'm going to do to him when we meet him. Kyuubi began to cackle madly, making Naruto's sweat drop lightly. Okay, moving on, do you have any other ideas besides a date? If not, I know a new restaurant in the village that could use a skylight and a new paint job. Naruto, being the great artist that he was, always thought that the interior color scheme of Fuji's was quite dull. And he'd be all too eager to add a splash of color to the inside. Everything on the inside. Kyuubi snickered at the thought of enraged and panicked humans covered in paint and not knowing who did it. Well Kit, I suggest you learn more about your armor, the cloak to be specific. There are certain techniques that you can do with the cloak to make them more effective. Naruto nodded and headed for his training area outside the village. He used his shadow walk technique to jump from shadow to shadow. It actually took longer than it would have with the body flicker, but Naruto wanted as much practice with the shadow walk as he could get. You're getting much better, Kyuubi commented. You went 3/4 of a mile with that last one. I can go a full mile with the body flicker, so that's the benchmark to beat. So, you said something about techniques that can be enhanced with the cloak? Do you remember a technique called Thousand Eyes? Vaguely. You only mentioned it in passing, and that was a month ago. It was originally created so humans could literally have eyes in the backs of their heads, but you can put them anywhere you like. You can even put them on objects, as long as they can hold chakra to keep the technique going. The cloak would be a prime example. It's also perfect for genjutsu that require eye contact, like the Tsukuyomi of the Mangekyo Sharingan. Now there's a technique I wish I could use. Well, I can't give you the Sharingan, but with the Thousand Eyes technique, you can create things just as terrible. You see, those types of genjutsu use eye contact to transfer small chakra seeds directly into your opponent's brain. If these seeds are allowed to grow and spread, things like the Tsukuyomi are the result. A single seed can be planted in only a fraction of a second, but unless the user is extremely proficient with these genjutsu and can transfer much more powerful seeds, one is normally not enough. This is why some genjutsu may require prolonged eye contact. This is where the Thousand Eyes comes in. Each eye can be used to transfer a seed, and if your opponent's focus jumps from one eye to another, as it often does, you've got the potential for several seeds to be planted in the space of a few seconds, dramatically increasing the power of the genjutsu will have over the opponent's mind. Naruto nodded, absorbing the knowledge like a sponge. But there was one small problem. Naruto had never bothered to learn any genjutsu beyond the fairly basic ones, like the hell viewing technique and tree binding death, neither of which worked using eye contact. Of course, Kyuubi knew that. I've got a couple of illusions that pack quite a punch, but I'll show them to you later. You know, when we have an expendable guinea pig. For now, let's just concentrate on the thousand eyes technique. The next morning, Naruto instantly sat straight up when he heard his alarm clock go off. He smirked under his mask. Today would be a good day. And a good day for Naruto was fighting a challenging opponent and/or blowing things up. Preferably several hundred things. Something came to Naruto last night for his potential fight with Kakashi. He could use many different techniques without hand seals, and an ordinary human could not learn demon skills. And since Kakashi was just a human and the Sharingan could only copy hand seals and chakra flow, if Naruto stuck with his fire, wind and darkness techniques, he'd be just fine. But Kyuubi had also told him not to show off too much, so he couldn't do something like Fire Dragon Flame Missile without seals, unless he wanted to attract attention to himself. And then there was the Uchiha. It was obvious that he was extremely power hungry, and if Naruto showed just how large the gap between their powers was, the Uchiha would be furious and demand a fight or something else ridiculous. Naruto warped his armor to his normal attire. He wouldn't need real armor since it was only training. And he was pretty certain that the cloak would be protection enough. Naruto checked to see if his traps were still set, then walked out the door. Naruto would have used the shadow walk if not for one important detail. He had no idea where Training Ground 7 was. Naruto eventually found the clearing with a small stream going through it and a small red bridge going across it. He decided to have a little fun and used the cloak to mask his chakra, then he used the shadow walk to sink into the ground. Not enough to travel to the world known as the Shadow Realm, but he stood right on the border between the two worlds, and he waited for his teammates to arrive. It had been 10 minutes, and Naruto was getting tired of waiting. But just as he was about to come to the surface, he felt the Uchiha and the Banshee's chakra. He could hear them talking. Well, the girl was talking. The Uchiha was just trying his damnedest to ignore her. And failing, if his twitching left eye was any indication. Well, they are finally here, but I'll probably have to wait another couple of hours for Hitaki-sensei. Naruto thought for a second and came up with a plan. Naruto made a darkness clone and sent it out to find the masked Jonin's chakra signature. The clone had found Kakashi staring at the memorial stone. The stone that held the names of all the most respected ninja to die in battle. The clone used the thousand eyes and extended part of its cloak, which was really just an extension of its own body, so he could look at the stone without getting too close. He found that Kakashi seemed to be staring at 3 names in particular: Obito Uchiha, Rin and Arashi Kazama. His old team and sensei. So, this is why he's late all the time. It's unhealthy to dwell on the past too much. Naruto decided to give Kakashi a little push to get him to move. He told the clone to use a voice displacement technique to whisper in Kakashi's ear and tell him to get moving. Meanwhile, Kakashi continued to stare at the memorial stone that held the names of his best friend, his first love, and his old sensei. I'm sorry I couldn't be there for you guys. I'm sorry I was so weak at the time. But never again. As long as I'm still breathing, I'll never abandon another teammate. The silver-haired shinobi thought sadly, but with determination. He then heard a whisper. It was so faint that he could barely hear it, but it was there. Go to your new team. Your students need a teacher, otherwise they will die. Without you they will never be prepared for real missions. Dwelling on the past too much is not good for you, and in your case, for those around you as well. What if they are being brutally tortured and dying right now? Calling out to you for help? But you're too busy staring at a rock to notice anything. Someone is watching you right now, and could have killed you in 100 ways by now. You call yourself a shinobi? You try to play it cool and aloof all the time, but on the inside you are nothing but a little wimp who still blames himself for something that happened over a decade ago. Get over it, it wasn't your fault. Now move your ass and show this new generation how to be proper ninjas. The whisper stopped. Kakashi whipped around, frantically looking for the owner of the voice, and the person it said was watching him. He neither saw nor felt anyone or anything. The area was completely empty of human life besides himself. He looked back at the rock with wide eyes. For some reason that voice reminded him of the fourth. That certainly was odd, he thought. Then the whisper came back, sounding enraged this time. Move. This time it really did sound like the Yondaime, and Kakashi kicked into high gear, making a beeline for the training ground where his new genin team was. Sasuke was about one more. How about it, Sasuke-kun? From strangling the pink-haired banshee. He was mentally praying for anyone to show up, especially Naruto. He had a way of shutting up almost anyone by just being there. And that was an ability that Sasuke desperately needed right now. Just then a familiar scarecrow-like ninja appeared before them. Yo, he greeted, not looking up from his little orange book. Sakura's attention was momentarily wrenched from Sasuke. You're late, she shrieked, making Sasuke cover his ears. Kakashi's sweat dropped. Such a loud genin. He then looked around for his third genin. Where's Naruto? Meanwhile, said ninja was still underground, and slowly sneaking up on the Jonin. He then used the Jonin's shadow to appear behind him. I was here 10 minutes before the others, Naruto said in his normal monotone. Kakashi jumped slightly. He hadn't felt the kid's chakra at all. How did you? Every ninja has his secrets. Naruto cut off Kakashi with a simple answer. Kakashi nodded and walked away from Naruto. He wanted a little more distance between himself and the creepy Jinchuriki. He turned to face his new team with a hidden smile. Alright, team, we will now begin your survival training. Sakura groaned while Sasuke merely intensified the scowl that had been on his face ever since he woke up. Naruto just shrugged. But we already did that in the academy. Sakura protested. Kakashi merely smiled. Yes, but not this kind of survival training. Kakashi then took out 2 gold bells attached to a piece of string. You have to take these from me. He then took out a timer and sat it on a stump. You have until noon to do it. Those who can't get a bell will not eat lunch for today, and they'll also be sent back to the academy for another year. Sakura looked horrified. But there's only 2 bells, and 3 of us. Kakashi simply smiled. Exactly. You could almost see the question mark above Sakura's head. Remember to come at me with the intent to kill, or else you won't get anywhere. But won't you get hurt, sensei? If Naruto could laugh normally, he would have been on the floor by now. Sakura was one of the weakest people he had ever seen, civilian or otherwise, and she thought she could hurt a Jonin. Kakashi just smiled. Begin, he shouted. Instantly, Sasuke and Sakura jumped away and into the trees to hide. But Naruto stayed where he was, just staring at Kakashi. Naruto? Naruto began snoring and Kakashi's sweat dropped, along with boy's teammates. What the hell is that idiot doing? Sasuke wondered to himself. Kakashi shrugged and walked over to the boy and poked him in the forehead. Only then did he realize his mistake. Naruto grabbed his arm and looked up into his face. Gotcha. Kakashi seemed to phase right through Naruto's hands, slipping out of his grip and leaving a log in his place. As he jumped back, Kakashi prepared an admonishing speech for his, he believed, overzealous student. Unfortunately, he was kicked in the ribs by a second Naruto before he even landed. What the hell? Clones aren't supposed to be able to make physical contact. These same thoughts were shared by Kakashi, Sasuke and Sakura. Naruto simply smirked and removed his cloak, tossing it away. It quickly became apparent that he had to make a conscious effort to keep the cloak from lashing out at the Jonin, and he couldn't afford to split his focus on this occasion. Besides, he had a plan for the cloak that required a bit of subtlety. What's wrong, Kakashi-sensei? Having trouble with mere clones? Naruto mocked. Kakashi responded with a hard right hook to the face of a clone. He was completely caught off guard when the clone didn't disappear, but instead hit him back even harder, sending him into a tree. Was that the real one? He wondered out loud. Another Naruto came out of the tree behind him. Nope, but I am. He kicked Kakashi, only to have his boot make contact with another log, shattering it into splinters. Naruto looked at the Jonin that was now 50 feet away and holding a kunai in a battle position. These are not normal clones, nor are they shadow clones. They are something on a whole new level, darkness clones. Naruto crossed his arms over his chest and mumbled, "Fire release. Fire dragon flame missile." He took a deep breath, then unleashed a torrent of flames from his mouth, which took the form of a large dragon and sped towards its target. "What did I tell you about showing off?" Kyuubi sighed. "What? How did he do that without seals? How could he do it in the first place? How does he even know that technique?" Kakashi thought frantically, barely avoiding the burning dragon. "What is this boy?" Naruto smirked under his mask. "Kakashi-sensei, don't you dare run from me. Stand and fight." Naruto roared as he charged forward with his easily Jonin-level speed. He seemed to disappear before his sensei. Kakashi didn't even have time to lift up his forehead protector before Naruto was on him. He blocked a powerful blow with his forearm, nearly breaking it in the process. What the hell? Kakashi thought. This boy was way too powerful to be completely human, let alone a mere genin. Things really began to pick up when Naruto began close-range combat. He went for a kick to Kakashi's head, which was, as he predicted, blocked. He used the recoil of his strike to spin in the opposite direction with tremendous speed, catching Kakashi off guard and nailing him in the head with a knee. Kakashi rolled along the ground a couple of times from the force of the blow, his head feeling like it had been used to forge a sword. As he rolled back to his feet, he saw Naruto and his clones were gone. He heard a low whistling noise and he ducked on instinct alone. Just as he did this, something flew over his head, shaving a bit of hair off the top. Kakashi immediately took out a kunai and slashed out at whoever was behind him, but he cut nothing but air. Apparently, the air didn't like that, as it seemed to retaliate with a slash of its own, putting a rather deep gash in the Jonin's forearm. Kakashi looked back for a split second and saw Naruto behind him with his right arm held up like a sword. There was an obvious distortion in the air around his arm, from which the odd whistling noise was coming. The Jonin rocketed forward as Naruto drove his arm into the ground where Kakashi had been milliseconds before. Naruto saw Kakashi prepared to throw a couple shuriken, but he knew he couldn't pull his arm back and jump away in time. So, he released the air from its chakra prison and it surged outwards, causing the ground around Naruto to explode into the air, creating a cloud of dust and sand. Kakashi, startled by the sudden explosion, missed his target completely. The deadly pieces of metal sliced through the air and lodged in a tree, right by Sasuke and Sakura's faces. This caused one to scream and fall out of the tree, and one to just stare at the other and shake his head. Kakashi tried to use this opportunity to lift his forehead protector, but he was once again interrupted by something. This time, it was a black tentacle that came out of the ground and tried to grab him. Kakashi jumped back, only to have another one sprout out right in front of him. The two tentacles did all they could to crush the scarecrow, but couldn't match his speed. He's fast. I can see why he was an Anbu captain. But let's see how he deals with this. Naruto thought as he watched his new human sensei avoid the tentacles. The writhing appendages suddenly stopped moving, prompting Kakashi to do the same and watch them from, he believed, a safe distance. He wasn't even going to chance trying to lift his forehead protector, as it seemed something bad happened every time he went for it. The ends of the tentacles split opened up to reveal grotesque mouths with vicious-looking teeth, spiny miniature tentacles, and copious amounts of drool. Oh shit, Kakashi thought. The tentacles shot a yellowish green slime out of their mouths, thus forcing Kakashi to resume the deadly game of cat and mouse. One of the slime balls hit the base of the tree that Sasuke and Sakura, who had only just climbed back into her previous perch, were watching the fight from. It began to eat through the trunk at an alarming rate, burning halfway through the tree in mere seconds. The tree leaned to side and began to fall, Sasuke and Sakura still in it. Sasuke immediately darted out of the tree and into another one, while Sakura just followed her crush as best she could. Kakashi took out two kunai and charged the tentacles, dodging globs of acid as he ran at tremendous speed. When he reached them, they lashed out, trying to sink those jagged teeth into the human's flesh. Kakashi twirled in midair to avoid the jaws of one tentacle and he cut it deeply with his kunai as it sailed by him. The creature roared loudly as it spewed disgusting, thick, purple blood all over the Jonin. It fell to the ground and dissolved into black dust, which sank into the dirt. This is just sick, Kakashi said as he tried to wipe some of the slimy blood off, but only succeeded in smearing it. You're getting a kick out of this, aren't you, Naruto? He muttered. The remaining tentacle lunged at him, but he jumped at the last second. Executing a picture-perfect corkscrew backflip over the creature, Kakashi drove both kunai into it as he came down, using gravity to aid him in pinning the creature to the ground. Kakashi found that the tentacle was quite squishy. He jumped back to avoid another spray of viscous purple blood, then he flashed through a sequence of hand seals and took a deep breath. Fire release. Great fireball technique. Kakashi unleashed a massive fireball on the pinned beast, burning it to a crisp. Up in his new tree, Sasuke was seething more than usual. That's an Uchiha technique. Why does he know it? Kakashi looked around for Naruto, but found no trace of him at all. His eye widened when he felt the ground beneath his feet rumble and shake. He jumped into the air just as 5 Naruto replicas launched out of the ground below him. The clones followed the Jonin up and one by one they engaged him in taijutsu. Kakashi was not accustomed to fighting in midair, as it was hard to concentrate when you're falling. The clone Kakashi was currently facing through a horizontal kick at his head, but he tilted back to avoid it and caught the clone with a solid kick to the chin. Kakashi righted himself as he hit the ground and the clones were instantly on him. He dodged a punch from one of them and drove his elbow into the back of its head as it passed, sending it into the ground. Another clone went for a sweeping kick, but Kakashi jumped over its leg and spun around to deliver a vicious kick to its temple. This would have counted as a fatal blow, affecting the large chakra storage unit located in the clone's head just as it would a real brain. But instead of rupturing blood vessels and the like, the storage unit ruptured, leaving the clone unable to retain its form and causing it to dissolve into black dust. Yet another Naruto used its own body to produce a rather long kunai and tried to stab Kakashi with a downward strike, but the Jonin used a replacement at the last second and the clone ended up staking a log to the ground. Kakashi appeared behind the clone and grabbed it by its chin and the back of its head, then twisted hard. After a sickening snap, crunch, the clone twitched a little and Kakashi feared that he had killed the real Naruto. But Naruto then fell limp and dissolved, showing that it was indeed a clone. Kakashi around and noticed that he still had 3 more clones to deal with. The one he had kicked in the air was back, and the one that he had elbowed was getting back up. Kakashi noticed that the last clone was hanging back slightly, and he deduced that it was the real Naruto. Before he could say anything, the Naruto that he had driven into the ground earlier was in front of him in the blink of an eye. The clone threw a hard right hook at the masked ninja, but he blocked it with his forearm and winced a little, as it was still bruised from when he blocked the real Naruto's kick. The clone was strong, but nowhere near strong enough to be the real Naruto. Kakashi grabbed the clone's arm, then grabbed the other one when the clone tried to retaliate. The clone struggled for a bit, then leaned back and swung its upper body forward, headbutting Kakashi. Said shinobi let go of the clone, which then hooked its foot around the back of Kakashi's neck and kicked downward from its position, driving Kakashi into the ground, where he went, poof. A shadow clone? Naruto mumbled from his position. He had used his cloak to disguise himself as a large rock near the edge of the training ground. Kakashi blurred into existence behind the Naruto clone and prepared to break its neck like he did with the other one. But the clone caught on to him and black spikes sprouted from its back, nearly impaling Kakashi. Kakashi jumped back, only to run into another clone and be kicked in the back and sent flying forward into the spiked back of the other clone. Just before he was made into a human pincushion he used a replacement and a log was skewered instead. But this log had 2 explosive notes attached to it and it blew up before the clone could even register what had happened. It was blown into a tree, where it impacted head first, leading to its death. 1 more clone to go. Kakashi thought as he looked at the 2 remaining Narutos, one of which he assumed was the real one. Both Narutos looked at each other and nodded, then charged forward at amazing speeds. That was when Kakashi knew that neither of them was the real Naruto, as his speed was around mid-Jonin, but these Narutos were both at high Chunin. In other words, nothing he couldn't handle. The clone went for a tandem attack, one jumping and going for the head and chest, the other going for the legs. Kakashi smacked one away with a hard backfist, then went for a roundhouse kick to the other's head. But the clone grabbed his foot at the ankle, spun over at 180 degrees and pulled him forward while extending its right leg and kicking backwards, planting its foot in Kakashi's face. The clone then threw a disoriented Kakashi at the other clone, which had recovered from Kakashi's strike. Said clone was charging towards the airborne Jonin with an aircutter ready to slice him in two. Kakashi saw this and he knew what that wind blade could do, but he couldn't counter it in his position, so he decided to take a big risk, one that could cost him his arm, or worse. Just when the clone was about to chop him into confetti, he grabbed the clone by its bicep. The clone tried to cut him to get free, but Kakashi spun and flipped the clone over his shoulder and smashed it into the ground. Kakashi kept his grip on the deadly arm and placed his foot on the clone's armpit, then jerked its arm up, dislocating the shoulder and making the clone deactivate the wind blade. But the clone did not scream out in pain, it just looked at Kakashi, accepting defeat and waiting for his next move. Kakashi looked over and saw the last clone coming at him with another wind blade, and he put the clone he was still gripping in front of him as a shield. The other clone cut through its companion without hesitation, and it split at the waist before dissolving. But the horizontal swipe left the clone open for an attack, which is exactly what Kakashi had planned. He used something he had copied from the legendary medic, Tsunade, and gathered chakra into his fist and punched the clone while releasing the built-up chakra. Its face caved in slightly and it flew into a large rock near the edge of the training ground. Kakashi followed the clone when he noticed that it was still alive, as it hadn't dissolved yet, and readied another Tsunade God Punch. He sent the fist through the clone's head and finally reduced it to dust, but Kakashi knew something wasn't right. His fist had also gone through the rock, but not how it should have. It was like it sank into the rock, then he noticed that he couldn't pull his arm out. A section of the rock pulsated, the only warning Kakashi received before a fist flew out of it and hit him square in the jaw, nearly breaking it. The rock released him and he flew back nearly 50 feet, then tumbled along the ground for another 30. Kakashi knew that it was the real Naruto this time, only 5 people had ever punched him like that. The Yondaime, Tsunade, Guy, Rin, and Naruto. And as far as he knew, only one of them was here at the time. Naruto stepped out of the rock, which proved to really be his cloak, and clapped. "Good, very good, Hitaki-san. You have beaten the clones, but would you like to see how you fare against the real thing?" Naruto said as he held out his arms, beckoning Kakashi. Kakashi had 2 reasons he was not using the Sharingan in this battle. 1. He would never live it down if it got out that he had used his secret weapon against an academy graduate, no matter how powerful he was. 2. Every time he went to uncover the eye, something bad would happen. But Kakashi decided that things were only going to get worse if he didn't use the Sharingan, and Naruto had some interesting moves that he may be able to use in the future. Screw it, my reputation will driven into the ground anyway if I get beaten by someone fresh out of the academy. Just when Kakashi was about to lift up his forehead protector, he noticed that he couldn't move his arm. What? He looked down only to see a black mass covering his hand and forearm. As he stared at it, several eyes opened up all throughout the mass, each one staring right back at him. What is this? A genjutsu? Kakashi thought about trying to break it, but then the mass began to move further up his arm. Then he noticed, this thing had weight to it. Whatever the hell this thing was, it was real. Kakashi fought hard to regain control of his body, but then another black mass latched onto his other arm and slowly moved up like its counterpart. Then Kakashi noticed his shadow seemed to be gradually growing darker. 2 more black masses encased his feet and moved up his legs, a little faster than the ones on his arms. Shit, 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 shit. Kakashi thought frantically when not a single plan of escape coming into his mind. Naruto suddenly appeared before him. Tisk, tisk, Kakashi-sensei. Such a simple trick, at least for me, but you still fell for it. And don't bother with trying to break this, it's not a genjutsu. Naruto emphasized his statement by having the dark masses squeeze Kakashi's arms and legs, making him grunt in slight pain. The mass had finally covered Kakashi's arms and legs completely, but stopped there. Then Naruto's cloak reappeared on his body and began to shift and morph. It grew a mouth with hundreds of razor-sharp fangs, all moving around inside its jaws in a similar fashion to teeth on a chainsaw. It released a low growl and extended from the cloak to rise high above Kakashi's head. The silver-haired ninja idly noticed that the thing resembled the tentacles that he had fought earlier in the battle. "So, do you give up?" Naruto asked. Even with the mask, Kakashi could tell that the boy had a glint in his eyes. and it told him that the wrong answer would mean a shitload of pain. Never. I will protect my comrades, no matter what. I will never abandon them. Kakashi answered. Naruto smirked under his mask. Good. If you had answered differently, you would have never had children. Kakashi cringed. The masses that held Kakashi receded back into Naruto's own shadow, and the cloak resumed its facade as a harmless, though creepy, accessory. It was then that the timer rang. Well, it looks like you all fail. Kakashi dusted himself off, but while doing it he noticed two things. First, the bells were missing. Second, his Icha Icha Paradise book was missing as well. He looked alarmed for a second, then he looked at Naruto, who reading the book with one hand while spinning the bells with the other. I don't understand you adults. As far as I can tell, you're all perverts. Naruto closed the book with a snap and tossed it to Kakashi, who caught it and checked for damages, then put it in his pocket again. So, when did you get the bells? Kakashi was genuinely curious, he hadn't even felt him get the things. Oh these, I got them right after Uchiha-san and Haruno-san went into the trees and you poked me in the forehead. Naruto continued to toy with the bells. Kakashi's visible eye widened. What? How? I didn't even feel it. And if you had them, why did you continue to fight me? Naruto looked at him. What's the one shadow no man is ever suspicious of? Kakashi thought for a second, then it hit him, literally, something hit him in the leg. He looked down to see a tentacle coming out of his own shadow. It waved at him then went back in. Kakashi looked back at Naruto. His own. Naruto nodded. Correct. The reason I kept fighting you was so that I could see if you were worthy of your bingo book status. A test if you will. Kakashi was shocked. No one below Chunin in rank should have had access to a bingo book. But he shrugged it off. From now on, nothing that Naruto did would surprise him. And? He asked. You passed. Kakashi nodded. Then Sasuke and Sakura appeared from their hiding places. Sasuke glared at Naruto while Sakura just moved behind Sasuke, hiding from Naruto, who she now labeled as some sort of demon. Well, team, you failed. Kakashi deadpanned. What? Both Sasuke and Sakura yelled. Naruto just smirked, he saw Kakashi's game. Hold it, sensei. Naruto then tossed both bells to his teammates, parted his cloak, and got into a fighting stance. Now that they're safe, we will continue our fight so that I may earn my position. Kakashi smiled. Well, in light of new developments, you pass. Sasuke and Sakura face-faulted. What? They both screamed again. Kakashi's smile widened. This test was to promote teamwork, and it's obvious that Naruto was the only one who got that. This was a simulation, of sorts. If you were on a real mission, the bells may have been important scrolls or something, and I would have been an enemy ninja. What he just did would be the same as passing you to the scrolls and staying behind to fight the enemy and keep them from catching up to you. He would have made a tough decision for the good of the team and the mission. He explained to his two confused students. Even though it is against protocol to play hero, remember this. Those who don't follow the rules are trash, but those who abandon their comrades are worse than trash. It was then that Sasuke decided to start his, "How'd you get so powerful?" rant. He walked up to Naruto and grabbed his cloak. Where did you get that kind of power? He hissed. Naruto just looked at the Uchiha. You'll never be able to get it, so why bother asking? Naruto's cloak then shoved Sasuke to the ground. And don't touch my cloak. You might not get that arm back next time. Sasuke jumped to his feet and yelled. I will find out how you got so strong, even if I have to beat it out of you. He charged at Naruto like the arrogant fool that he was. Naruto just sighed and grabbed his wrist, flipped Sasuke over his head and slammed him into the ground again. As his vision swam and consciousness slowly faded, Sasuke heard Naruto say these words. You need to stop that, I'm better than you because I'm an Uchiha, bullshit. Your clan name and your bloodline don't mean shit to me, nor will it mean much to most of your future opponents. You want the power to beat your brother? Then do as everyone else does, and work for it. Then Sasuke was out like a light. Naruto turned to Sakura. Haruno-san, take him to the hospital. The girl nodded, picked up Sasuke and ran. Normally, she would have struggled just to get Sasuke onto her shoulders, let alone run with his added weight. But fear caused the body to produce adrenaline, and adrenaline was awesome like that. Kakashi sighed and shook his head. Well, someone doesn't play well with others. Is there any reason I should? If I need some extra bodies, I've got clones. Those two are useless. Naruto scoffed. They are still your comrades, regardless of what you think of them. You and your comrade bullshit. If you aren't the biggest hypocrite I've ever laid eyes on, I don't know who could possibly rank higher than you. Naruto all but snarled. Excuse me? Kakashi's eye narrowed as he turned to full-face his student. He began to subconsciously radiate a bit of killing intent as his anger rose. You heard me. You say those who would abandon their comrades are worse than trash, but I have to wonder if there aren't some exceptions in your mind. After all, you had no problem abandoning me 6 years ago. Naruto said, completely unfazed by the man's glare or his killing intent. Kakashi recoiled as if physically struck by the words. What? He stammered, his mind reeling with the implications. Perhaps you should see a doctor, as it would appear that you're going deaf. And with that, Naruto vanished in a puff of black smoke, leaving Kakashi to stroll down memory lane by himself. Naruto was standing on the Hokage monument, atop the fourth stone head. He stared out over the village, torn between wanting to admire its beauty and wanting to destroy it. He knew that with enough of Kyuubi's chakra and a few well-placed blackfire dragons, he could take out half of the village then leave before anyone knew it was him. It would be so easy. The rest of the village would have thought he was obliterated by the dragons, and the blame would most likely be put on Uchiha Itachi, who was well known for his Amaterasu attacks, which created black flames that burned through anything and could burn for hours, maybe even days, if left alone. Naruto could then run away to another village. No, another country altogether. But why should he do that? Going to another place with strangers that he knew nothing about. At least in Konoha he knew who almost everyone was, and he knew what many of their weaknesses were. For example, most, if not all, men Konoha were perverts. And they could be put out of a battle by a simple clone with a henge to make it look like a supremely attractive nude female. Naruto had no idea if other countries or villages had anti-pervert laws or anything. Maybe children were trained not to be fooled by such simple tricks. Besides, Naruto could no longer really say that he would want to escape from the hatred and fear he got in Konoha. Let them fear me, let them hate me. It's not like they can do anything about it. Naruto said out loud. Don't get, Kit. Remember what I told you. Kyuubi said in a matter-of-fact tone. Naruto snorted. The only people in this village that could ever defeat me are Guy, Kakashi, Hokage-sama, the Jiraiya of the Sannin, Madara, Mirana, and perhaps the twins. Naruto finished his limited list. Kyuubi then thought of something. Hey, what about the blonde woman with the huge breasts? Isn't she one of the Sannin also? Naruto shrugged. With her pathetic hemophobia, she will be easy to take care of if the time comes. He continued to look out over the village. I wonder when my team and I will get our first missions. Naruto still wasn't all too familiar with the concept of a team. Don't get too excited, Kit. They'll just be D-class missions until your human sensei deems you worthy of higher ranks. And with those two genin, that might take a while, especially the Banshee. Kyuubi said. 6 hours later. What to do, what to do, what to do. Naruto began his boredom chant again. Oh, Kami, not again. Kyuubi groaned. She had to think fast. Damn it, he does this at the most inopportune times. Come on, think, I've got it. Kyuubi finally got an idea that may prolong the existence of some random object for at least a while. Kit, Naruto stopped in mid-chant. I have an idea. I'm listening. Kyuubi grinned evilly. Go find the pale-eyed girl that's always stalking you, and the crazy woman with the purple hair and the trenchcoat. Naruto rose an eyebrow. Why? Simple, so you can seduce them and get laid. Naruto's sweat dropped heavily. Come again? And hopefully again and again. Naruto sighed. Not what I meant, Ero Kitsune. Kyuubi acted like she was insulted by the comment. Me, a pervert? You must be joking. One as awesome as myself has no need for perversion. Naruto sighed. I don't care what you say, you're still a pervert in my book. Kyuubi giggled. Ah, come now, admit it. You find the idea of me being a pervert incredibly hot. That might be so, I won't deny it, but I am not one to act upon my desires. Kyuubi scoffed. Bullshit. What about your desire to destroy things? I'm fairly certain I got that from you. Alright, what about your desire to pull immature pranks on random people? Remnants of my childhood, but they are still strengthened by your own nature. You're a prankster at heart, as are all kitsune, according to the legends. True. How about your desire to fight strong opponents? Okay, I'll give you that one. But damn near every male ninja on the planet has the same desire. We always seek to test our power against an opponent at least on par with us. Well, since you've suddenly become Mr. Morality, I'll have to think of something else for you to do. How about you go find your human sensei and ask him about missions? Naruto perked up. Well, if you could call him raising an eyebrow, perking up. This might prove to be entertaining, he thought as he searched for Kakashi's chakra signature. He eventually found it, which wasn't all too hard. Kakashi had an alignment with the lightning, which was very uncommon in Konoha. Now if he had an alignment with earth or fire, then he would have been damn near impossible to find from a distance. Naruto had found Kakashi inside of the local adult bookstore. He waiting by the side of the door, using his cloak to hide himself as a part of the wall. The masked Jonin eventually walked out of the store, holding the next volume Icha Icha Paradise, and giggling perversely. Hello, Ero-sensei. Naruto took this moment to make his presence known. Kakashi literally jumped 15 feet in the air, bounding across the street and whirling around to face his would-be attacker. Only to see his creepy, freakishly strong, masked student. He immediately hid his little orange book behind his back. Naruto. Hello to you too. What are you doing here? We have no missions today. Naruto stayed in the shadows created by the roof over the entrance of the store, only his white mask visible, which made it look like Kakashi was talking to an ornamental mask hanging on the wall for display. That's exactly what I wanted to talk to you about. When are we getting our first missions? Well, after what you did to Sasuke, I'd say, the day after tomorrow. Naruto scoffed. What, the great Uchiha survivor can't take a few hits? Kakashi tilted his head a little. Well, you slammed him into the ground quite hard. He's only a genin, and so am I, Naruto answered. In his mind, Kakashi was screaming, bullshit, but he kept his thoughts at bay. You can drop the act around me. We both know that you are on a whole different level than Sasuke and Sakura. You very nearly shattered the boy's ribcage when you treated him like a rag doll. Kakashi was not about to bring up his own ass kicking. Naruto chuckled darkly, as if he could do it any other way. What? I thought that a member of the great Uchiha clan could take at least that much of a beating and still fight. I guess I was wrong. Regardless, he's still a genin. High genin, maybe, but a genin nonetheless. So, he has an ego fit for a cage, yet he has nowhere near the amount of power, skill and experience that would entitle him to such arrogance. If I want to fight a true Uchiha, I guess I'll either have to wait for Sasuke, or seek out Itachi. But, in waiting for Sasuke, I'll only get stronger, so he'll never be a match for me. In a few thousand years, maybe, but neither of us have that long. I did us all a favor and I took him down a few pegs. It wasn't enough in my opinion, but it's a start. Kakashi nodded, he could clearly see and agree with the boy's logic. Fair enough. But what do you mean by a true Uchiha? I mean a power-hungry bastard that will go through anyone and do anything to get what he wants. Itachi did just that, by killing his best friend and gaining the Mangekyo Sharingan. But Sasuke did inherit one thing from his family, obsession. All Uchiha were obsessed with something. Even Obito and Mikoto. Two of the few Uchiha that were generally liked. Their obsessions were to a much lesser extent than that of others, but they were still present. Most Uchiha are obsessed with power, like Itachi, and gaining the Mangekyo. But none of them ever could, because they had no friends. Obito had the chance to gain it, by killing you, but he wasn't obsessed with power, and neither was Mikito. This leads me to believe that those two were not pure-blooded Uchihas, but that is of no importance at the moment. Naruto finished his little speech. Kakashi was stunned, this kid really knew his history. What do you mean Obito was obsessed with something? Naruto rolled his eyes behind his mask. For a Jonin, you aren't very observant, are you? You should have noticed something. Something he always talked about? Something he always stared at when he walked by it? Something he told you he always dreamed about? It could have been anything, but the records show that he was obsessed with ramen. Which, incidentally, was the main cause for him being on the short side. 1. Kakashi scratched his chin. Now that he thought about it, he had never seen someone put away as much ramen as Obito had. And whenever Arashi-sensei would take them out for the seasoned noodles, Obito would jump for joy and act like an idiot. Before he could say anything, Naruto spoke again. I just came here for my initial question, so I'll leave you to your perversions. Until our first mission, Arrow-sensei. With that, Naruto sank into the shadows and disappeared. Kakashi narrowed his eye a little. Interesting boy. Creepy and antisocial, but interesting nonetheless. The Jonin went back to his book, giggling every few seconds, earning him strange looks and glares from most females. Naruto was back in his apartment, bored out of his mind yet again. What to do, he muttered. Kyuubi sighed. Hey Kit, how about some of my special training? She grinned evilly. Naruto snorted. I would, but I don't want to be killed again, and again and again. Naruto almost shuddered at the thought of the torturous hell that Kyuubi called training. Ah, come on Kit, I won't be too rough on you this time, I promise. If only Naruto could see her puppy dog eyes. What Kyuubi defined as training, most described as bottom circle of hell itself. Her program included fighting her while she was in her human form and almost nude, throwing off Naruto's concentration horribly, then teasing him about it while kicking his ass. During the training, she and Naruto often fought on pieces of earth floating over spike and or lava pits, or on top of the spikes themselves, using chakra to keep from being impaled. But with Kyuubi's rather large assets jiggling all the time, Naruto was often skewered. Sometimes Kyuubi would leap on top of him and attempt to seduce him, then stab him, saying that it was a test. Naruto knew it was just in case an enemy kunoichi tried to seduce, kill him, but he thought she could have gone about it in a less painful way. I will not fall for your tricks a fifth time, Devil Woman. Naruto said to the demon fox. That's Devil Queen, and you will eventually. You always do. She smirked. Naruto just grumbled something about treacherous, evil fox women. I'm not evil. Kyuubi protested, I'm just misunderstood. If Naruto could see her, she'd be in a corner in chibi form with a spotlight on her and weeping while drawing little circles on the floor with her finger. Naruto really didn't know how to react to that, so he did what he always did in those situations. He cocked his head to the side and said nothing. 2 months later, Naruto was as close as he had ever been in his life to going psycho on everyone and everything in a 10-mile radius. He was currently on a joint mission with 3 other teams, Team 10, Team 8, and Team Guy. Kyuubi shuddered at the memory of how her vessel met the spandex-clad freak and his 3 students. Flashback. 2 hours earlier. Team 7 had just been to the Hokage's office to get a new mission. D-class, of course. They were to be working with Teams 10, 8, and a team that they hadn't heard of called Team Guy. Naruto knew that Team Guy was actually Team 9, still in circulation from last year's Genin class, but his info on them wasn't very extensive. Rock Lee was a taijutsu expert that could barely use chakra. Neji was a typical Hyuga, a branch member, whose ego had been massively boosted from all the praise he regularly received from the entire Hyuga clan. Tenten was the only female of the team, and a weapons expert that specialized in ranged combat. Overall, Lee was the only member of the team that drew any interest from Naruto, as he had trained with him a few times in his younger years. Kakashi visibly paled when he heard the name, Guy, but, at the time, only Kurenai and Asuma had any idea why. They were told to meet the other teams and their senseis at the training ground 27, and so they did. When they had arrived, they were immediately greeted by a Jonin in a green spandex bodysuit. Hello Kakashi, my eternal rival. I see your flames of youth burn as brightly as ever. The man shouted. Kakashi just looked up from his book. You say something, Guy? He asked lazily. Naruto could see he had earplugs in. The response seemed to have set Guy off even more. Ah, you and your youthful wit. Guy was in tears now. Then his mini-me student shouted at almost the same volume, do not worry, Guy-sensei. You will defeat him one day. This was the catalyst for one of the sights that would be burned into Naruto's mind forever. Guy turned to his little clone. Oh Lee, he shouted and ran to his student. Guy-sensei. Lee ran at his teacher. Lee, Guy-sensei. Lee. They met each other in the middle, then the genjutsu activated. The background turned into a sunset on a cliff with splashing waves. Naruto made the correct seal under his cloak and whispered, Kai, but nothing happened. What the hell? Oh, Kami-sama, that's not a genjutsu, it's all real. Kyuubi shrieked. Naruto had to put a stop to this, and quick. As teacher and student began hugging each other and crying, the sun in the background turned into a giant red eye that glared rusty daggers at them. The Brow brothers turned to the eye and whimpered, then they heard a low growling noise. They looked over and saw the cloaked form of Naruto towering over them, as they were on their knees. The eyes slits of his mask began to glow a menacing icy blue. His cloak seemed to be going crazy and was warping into different shapes, tentacles and things of the like. Separate, now. Naruto finished with a demonic, chakra-enhanced growl and glowing crimson eyes. The spandex freaks instantly broke apart and stood on opposite sides of the clearing, still in tears. Naruto snorted and walked over to a tree and leaned on it while everyone stared at him. He had managed to do, with 2 words, what others couldn't with entire speeches. When everyone snapped out of their stupor, Kakashi cleared his throat and spoke. "Well, I guess introductions are in order," he said, "but Kakashi-sensei, we already know everyone here except for them." Sakura gestured to Team Guy. Then, in a rare display of effort, the ever-lazy Shikamaru Nara spoke up. "Ah, but there are those here that we know nothing about, even though they were in our class," he said, obviously talking about Naruto, and to some extent Shino. Naruto just growled, then uncrossed his arms. Everyone was looking at him expectantly. Naruto snapped his fingers and the ground behind him erupted in red and orange flames. The flames morphed and contorted into a solid shape, then disappeared as suddenly as they came, leaving behind a throne that looked fit for the god of the void himself. Naruto sat down in it and crossed his legs and rested his head on his right fist, which was propped up on the armrest. "Carry on." Heart monitors had more tone variance. "Yash, Kakashi, it seems that your student burns with the fires of screw it. Let's just do this and get it over with," Guy said, surprising everyone. "No, Guy-sensei. The unyouthful actions of the creepy one have doused your flames of youth. You must train to rekindle them," Lee shouted while punching the air a couple of times. The rant did the trick, unfortunately. "Yash, you are right, Lee. We must train to keep our flames burning brightly," he shouted, and they hugged and cried. Everyone looked at Naruto, pleading for him to stop the freaks. Naruto sighed. "I doubt I can get them to stop without killing them, but I guess I could try." Again, he stood from his throne. The cloak morphed into a monstrous mouth with teeth that looked to be ripped straight from the jaws of a shark. Guy and Lee's sobs turned into small whimpers of terror as they looked into the gaping maw, hugging each other tighter. "If you don't separate right now, neither of you will ever have children." The cloaked monster gnashed its teeth and drooled. "Why, you can't do that. It would be treason," Lee said. Naruto looked at him. "Treason, or a public service?" "Public service," everyone else said. "Unyouthful people," both Lee and Guy shouted as they let go of each other. "Whatever." Naruto's shark thing turned back into his cloak, until it had to be used to threaten someone else's manhood. "Okay," Kakashi spoke again, "foregoing introductions for now, what are your missions?" "Ours is to track down the Lady Shijimi's cat, Tora." The man with the cigarette was the first to speak. "Ours is to find a group of 10 academy students that escaped from Uruka during a field trip." The red-eyed woman was the next. "We're helping Team 10. Next was Guy. "We are to apprehend a villager's 3 children." For once Guy didn't shout. Kakashi nodded. "Alright Asuma, Kurenai, Guy, I guess we're all in this together." He sighed, he hated working with Guy. End flashback. Kakashi tapped his earpiece and called out to the teams. "This is Arrow Cyclops, is everyone in position? Over. This is Banshee Pink, I'm in position. And Naruto, I hate you, over. This is Emo King, I'm in position, over. This is Super Brow, I'm in position, over. This is Mega Brow, I'm in position, over. This is Panda, I'm in position. And Naruto, I also hate you, over. This is Emo Prince, I'm in position, over. This is Chain Smoker, I'm in position, over. This is Banshee Blonde, I'm in position. Naruto must die, over. This is Pineapple, I'm in position, over. This is Barbecue, I'm in position, and my code name is making me hungry, over. This is Red Eye, I'm in position, over. This is S Stalker C Code Girl, I'm in position, over. Well, she didn't have to wonder if Naruto knew about her favorite pastime anymore. This is Kibble Breath, I'm in position. Naruto, when I get my hands on you, over. This is Insecticide, I'm in position, over. Kakashi sighed at the code names, but one person didn't answer. Abyss? Abyss, do you copy? Abyss? Cat. Must. Die. Over. Kakashi's eye widened. Shit. Everyone, code black, code black. He ran to Naruto's location. Damn it. Everyone else swore as they ran to Naruto. They heard chuckling over the radio. Here kitty, kitty, kitty. I won't hurt you. I'll end you, too. They heard a loud crash, followed by another, then another. Hey, get back here with that little hellspawn. I found the kids, they have abducted the lint ball. I will find you. Everyone sped up, they didn't much care about the cat, but the kids were another story. They arrived at Naruto's assigned position, only to find several trees leveled and other decimated greenery. Where'd he go? Sakura inquired. They heard several loud screams, the children. What the? Did you just throw a rock at me? Silly child, your weapons cannot harm me. Don't you know who the fuck I am? I'm Naruto, bitch. 3. They heard more loud crashes. Come on, we have to stop him. Kakashi rushed towards the noise, followed closely by the others. When they arrived, they saw Naruto had all 13 children and the cat cornered and the shark cloak thing was back, but it was much bigger. Naruto, stop, Kakashi yelled. Naruto turned around, the eye slits of his mask glowing red. At least let me kill the cat, he said in a semi-demonic voice that made them all cringe. No, Naruto, no killing. It's very bad for business. Besides, you have a bad enough reputation as it is, don't give the villagers and the council a reason. Naruto narrowed his hidden eyes at his sensei, then released his control on the cloak. He calmed himself down and looked at Kakashi. Well, the mission is complete, so I have no more reason to be here. I'm going to train, if you need me. Well, if you need me, you're shit out of luck I guess. Team 7 all had a collective eye twitch. Where can we find you if something comes up? Kakashi asked. I'll find you, but if you simply must see me, ask old man Hokage, he knows where I train. With that Naruto walked into the shadow of a tree and disappeared from sight. Neji activated his Byakugan, but he saw no sign of the boy aside from faint traces of dark purple chakra. He knew that wasn't normal, but nothing about Naruto was normal as far as he knew. The Forest of Death. The deadly forest was oddly quiet and peaceful. No screams of unnatural animals as they were devoured by, well, anything. Even the plants could eat you in this place. A fluffy brown rabbit hopped through the forest. Everything seemed normal about it, except for the fact that it was the size of a large wolf, had 4 yellow eyes, horns and razor-sharp teeth and claws. There was a sudden scuttling sound, like something sliding across the ground on multiple legs. The rabbit thing's ears twitched and it hissed at its surroundings. As soon as it made a sound, a massive 40-foot centipede lunged from its cover and wrapped its body around the rabbit. It sank its scissor-like fangs into the mammal's neck, then plunged the rest of its legs into the body. Blood poured out of the wounds, accompanied by a thick, pale yellow liquid, venom. The rabbit gurgled out its last breath before the centipede wrenched its body to the side, but held its head in the same place, thus snapping its neck. The massive chelopod proceeded to devour its prey, and within minutes the only evidence that the rabbit had even been there was bits of fur, blood, and its head. This is the scene the Naruto appeared in. He scanned the area for any potential enemies and predators. His eyes locked onto a giant centipede that was quickly scuttling in his direction. As soon as the centipede felt it was being watched, it reared up, bringing a fourth of its body off the ground and compressed the multiple air sacs hidden throughout its segmented body, producing a loud hissing sound as a warning. Naruto just stared at the creature before he took a step forward, then another, and another, until he was right in the thing's face. He stared into its minuscule eyes, not blinking. The centipede stopped hissing and leaned in slightly. Naruto pointed at the forest behind the chelopod. Go, he said simply. The centipede seemed to almost nod, then dropped its body to the ground and scuttled off in the direction Naruto had pointed out. Ever since Naruto had become a half-demon, he could communicate with certain animals to an extent. Anything that was at least semi-intelligent, he just had to stare into its eyes for a few seconds and he could implant his thoughts into their minds, telling them what he wanted. Naruto thought of this as a useless ability, but then he had seen the Aburame and the Inuzuka clans in battle, and decided that it might be good to have at least one animal companion, he just didn't know what. Kyuubi, of course, had insisted on a fox. She detested wolves and most other canines, so they were out. Neither Naruto nor Kyuubi liked snakes, so no go there. Naruto had once asked about dragons, but Kyuubi had said the ones that were still alive were very, very hard to find. She had told him that he would need the summoning contract for dragons if he wanted to get anywhere without being eaten, but not even she knew where that was. Naruto looked around at the blood the centipede had left behind and he had found the head of a rabbit imp, one of the lowest level demonic animals. But they had their uses. Naruto went over and picked up the head, then stuck a finger into its neck. Still warm, only a few minutes old. Perfect. Naruto then jammed his thumb and index fingers into the socket of the bottom left eye of the rabbit imp and ripped out the now golden eye. He pulled out a small vial and popped the top on it, then crushed the eye and poured the dust that was left into the tube, then opened a portal to the shadow realm and deposited it. You see, the main use for a rabbit imp was its eyes, but only one eye in particular. After it dies, the bottom left eye of the creature becomes solid like a rock, and when turned into powder it can be used for many things. Like curing illnesses, upgrading weapons, poisons, or it can just be sold for a hefty price. Rabbit imps may have been weak by demon standards, but the big ones were almost impossible to take down for a normal human. A high Chunin wouldn't have much problems, and a Jonin could pick one off in a second, but they were only found in one place in Fire Country, and that was the Forest of Death. They liked to hang around the S-class sector of the forest for some odd reason, as being surrounded by predatory creatures that are stronger than you seemed like a bad idea to most. So it wasn't the imps themselves that kept people from coming after them, it was the other inhabitants of the forest that got people worried. After Naruto had dropped the vial in, he let his hand hover over the portal. A sheathed odachi suddenly shot up out of the portal and into his hand before he closed it. The sheath was made of a black metal that appeared to be polished, yet reflected no light. The hilt of the sword was black like the sheath, but had 9 diamond-shaped crystals embedded in it. The first 2 nearest to the handguard were red, but the rest were white. These indicated how much of Kyuubi's chakra Naruto had absorbed. 2 taels worth. Naruto looked around a clearing, channeling chakra into his eyes and scanning the surroundings. With the modifications Kyuubi had made to his body, namely making him a half-demon, simply gathering chakra into his eyes produced an effect similar to the Byakugan. Naruto found nothing and decided to start training. Darkness clone technique, he muttered. The shadows of 3 trees extended towards Naruto until they were about 5 feet from him. They spread into a circle, like a puddle, then receded back into the tree line. The puddles bulged and warped as large lumps rose out of them, like the dead rising from their graves. The lumps began to take on a human form, turning into copies of Naruto. The clones tilted their heads to look at their master and their target. Just when Naruto was about to take off his cloak, he sensed something up behind him. He didn't even bother to turn around, he just sighed when he heard a female voice. "Naru-chan," said female proceeded to glomp the masked boy. "I told you not to call me that, Mitarashi-san." Naruto sighed again. The purple-haired Tokubetsu Jonin just rubbed her cheek against Naruto's mask. "And I told you to call me Anko, so we're even." Anko grinned. Naruto groaned inwardly as he felt Anko's hand slowly creep up towards his mask. He just grabbed her hand and pulled it down, but then she tried to use her other hand, and he pulled that down too. But Naruto knew that wouldn't stop her from getting his mask off, she would just use her snakes to take it off. Naruto often wondered what was wrong with his cloak, as it would decimate anything that got too close without his permission, but it did nothing to Anko. He had discovered her immunity to his defense about a month ago, the same day he had gotten his sword, the Black Soul. Flashback. Anko Mitarashi was bored out of her mind. Her first genin team had failed with flying colors a few weeks ago, and now she had nothing to do. She hadn't gotten a solo mission in days, but that was somewhat fine with her. She had to do solo missions, as no one wanted to work with her because of her violent tendencies and her shady past. But the solo mission were hardly ever anything big, but she would still be stuck out in the forest for days at a time. And though she'd never admit it, she was lonely by herself, and slightly paranoid at times. As Anko was walked down the street, she did what she always did when bored: play with sharp objects. She reached into her kunai pouch to grab one, but found that she was running low, so she stepped into the weapons shop she was passing. She looked around the inside and whistled, Every type of weapon you could imagine was in here. Swords lined the walls, from the lightning-fast rapier to the massive zanbato. Anko herself was looking back and forth between a katana and a nagamaki. She looked towards the counter and sweat dropped when she saw Asuma staring at a pair of shiny new trench knives that were on display. His trademark cigarette hung limply from the side of his mouth, and he seemed to be drooling a little. She also saw a boy wrapped in a cloak with a hood and wearing an hunter-style mask. Anko grinned. It was her frequent partner in crime, Naruto Uzumaki. She then decided to sneak up on him. As she got within range, Naruto spoke. "I wouldn't try that, Mitarashi-san," he said, but it was too late. Anko already had her arms around him and had her chin resting on his head. "And why's that, Naru-chan?" Anko asked, starting to enjoy the feeling of the pulsating cloak against her. Naruto rose an eyebrow. "Strange, the cloak doesn't react to her at all." "Well, the cloak can detect even the most minuscule amounts of killing intent and malice. If the snake woman can get past it, then she has no intention of causing you harm. That's my theory anyway. Maybe the cloak just likes her, it is sentient, you know." Kyubi gave her opinion on the matter. "Great, I know she's going to use this to her advantage." "Well, Mitarashi-san, I was going to warn you about my cloak, but it seems it doesn't mind you being near me." Anko blinked, then looked at the cloak, which looked back at her and blinked as well. This almost caused her to scream and recoil, but she had a reputation to keep, so she just continued to stare. When you're me, it pays to have eyes everywhere," Naruto said. Anko, of course, knew exactly what he was talking about. She knew about the Kyubi and the seal, but she didn't care. She liked having someone like her. Someone who knew what she went through, though she knew Naruto had it much, much worse than she ever did. She knew for a fact that her worst day was still many times better than Naruto's best in the past. She liked knowing that she wasn't alone in that aspect, and she loved the idea of the village outcasts sticking together. After all, being the village pariah was a lonely position. Anko nodded, then rested her chin on Naruto's head again. "So, whatcha looking for, Naru-chan?" Naruto groaned mentally. "Don't call me that, Mitarashi-san. Just call me Naruto, or at the very least, Uzumaki-san." Anko just smirked. "Don't call me Mitarashi-san, just call me Anko for once." Anyway, I'm looking for a sword," Naruto said while poking a katana in front of him, then slightly shaking his head. "Oh? I didn't know you could use a sword. There are a lot of things that you don't know about me, just as there are many things I don't know about you." Naruto poked another sword, shook his head and moved on. "What are you doing?" Anko rose an eyebrow. "Channeling demonic chakra into the blades to see if they can handle it." Naruto moved on to the next blade. Anko's eyebrows almost disappeared behind her bangs. She took a close look at one of the swords that Naruto had poked and noticed a tiny, almost unnoticeable warp in the metal, showing that it had been melted by intense heat. Naruto was about to test another sword, but then his cloak went crazy. Black tendrils lashed out from random places and grabbed an katana in a pure black sheath. The tendrils retracted with the sword and placed it in Naruto's hands, then shifted back into the cloak. "Odd," Naruto said, then examined the sword. He noticed that the hilt was a couple of inches longer than a normal katana, and the blade was longer than normal by a foot. This made the total sword 5 feet long, just 7 inches short of Naruto's height. "An odachi, haven't seen one of those in a while," Anko commented. Naruto just nodded and unsheathed the sword a little, only letting a couple inches of the pitch-black blade show. But he felt something that made him freeze, demonic energy. "What is this?" "Oh no," Kyubi groaned. "I assume you know what this thing is?"